Council?
Fingers, you want to do the prayers?
didn't know it did affect the speaker.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, no. I didn't realize you guys were. I prefer to. We're on the same page. Nobody's turning them in. Yeah, nobody's turning them in.
Have everything. We'll call this meeting to order. We'll have a roll call, please.
Counselor Moore. Here. Counselor Perry. Present. Counselor Oropesa.
Here.
Counselor Hildenbrand.
Present.
Counselor Foster.
Present.
Counselor Korn.
Here.
Counselor Arnold. Present. Counselor Best. Here. Counselor Sanchez. Here. Counselor Halverson. Present. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So we've got a quorum. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance by Counselors Halverson and Arnold, and the prayer by the Councilman Perry. I would ask that you keep in mind the Queen. When you look at her history, she died today, she is 96, but when you look at her history and after World War II and the things that she was very instrumental and a very strong leader in this world, and I think that she should be. I think she was a very close ally of the United States, and I think we should keep her and the country and their country in our prayers. If we could, please, the Pledge of Allegiance, please, Council ladies.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Perry, please.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this evening, Lord, that you have given us to have the ability to look at the things that will be in the best behalf of our city. I pray you give us wisdom. I pray you give us the ability to do the governance of this city and do it well for our constituents. Lord, we pray for the United Kingdom tonight, all around the world, the many nations that have been under the monarch of Queen Elizabeth for over 70 years. Lord, we're thankful for her testimony and her love for you that she has shown through those years. Lord, I just pray that you would just comfort King Charles III and the rest of the family at this time. Be with the people of England and the rest of the United Kingdom, Lord, and strengthen them. Allow them, Lord, to continue to be an ally with the United States of America, that we can continue to have the freedoms that we have, and we would be strengthened by it. Lord, I pray that you would just be with all those that are serving our nation, Lord, and keeping us safe, whether that be around the world or just around the corner. Lord, just be with them. And Lord, just allow us tonight, Lord, to do things in unity that would honor you. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Next, we have approval of the agenda. In the way I understand that, on the approval of the agenda, there are a number of items on consent, which item 5 will be removed from consent and moved to 18A. Item 5 goes to 18A. And after we move these items, approve the agenda and move those items to consent, we have moved those items to consent. We will have another motion there. We'll hear from former Councilor Steve Henderson on item A, one of the items on Main Street. He would like to speak upon that and about that. And so that would probably be 1A. After that, we'd have Councilman. Then we would go immediately to presentations, if we would. Councilman Perry.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented, with pulling item 5, the consideration of $203,950 of the American Rescue CARES Act fund to be used for the public library for the air install scrubbers to be moved. Though it is a request, we will put it with the resolutions at 18A, and then follow with resolution 2250 as 18B. Everything else on the agenda will follow as prescribed.
We have a motion. It's by Councilman Perry, a second by Councilman Korn. Any discussion? You want to call the roll or voice vote? You want to practice some machines?
Oh, yeah. Let's Let's do the machines.
Okay, all those in favor, we're going to practice and try to get used to these machines, so all those members, please vote on the machines there.
Excuse me, Mayor, before we proceed, can you tell me who was the second on the approval of the agenda?
Councilman Corn?
Thank you.
My machine's not working.
Counselor Corn, can you press? Okay, thank you.
Is there still a voice with the machines, or we?
Mine.
Well, some of them came on. Mine doesn't vote unless you guys tie it up. Don't group it up. Okay, oh, now we got it.
Got it.
Okay. By a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, the motion has passed. Thank you, Councilman Perry. And now we have former Councilor Henderson, if you'd care to address us on, I believe, on Main Street, I think is item 14. Okay, we're just doing him first.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Want to just say a word about Main Street. And the reason I'm here is not because you shut my water off today. And they said it was by mistake. But I wanted to put a plug in for Main Street because they've been around since 1981. Some of you will remember Harold E. Shirley. And Harold E. Shirley gathered a group of us together, like Don Bullock, Nancy Miller, Mike Pemberton. Probably a dozen of us sat around a table and decided in '81 that Roswell should be a part of the Main Street program. And so over the years, we've kind of come up and come down on various programs. And but I wanted to assure you that the fact that Barbara Gomez is at the head of that organization now, I think you'll see it thrive. Not that it hasn't in the immediate past, but I think good things are ahead. One of the things that we were able to pull off when I was involved was that you'll remember we rebuilt Main Street, and that was about a $7 million project. And I sat in on a Main Street meeting up in Santa Fe, and they said the Department of Transportation has enhancement funds available for reconstruction of roadways. And so Roswell got busy. Our engineers put together a plan, and we received an additional $1 million for enhancements for our Main Street. And that provided the benches, the planters, the trees. We were able to do some new sidewalks. So Main Street is part of the economic development of our community. And I just want to assure you that it's a national program, and on the state level, it's actually overseen or run by the Department of Economic Development. And since then, I think Main Street, New Mexico has thrived. So I encourage you to support them and agree to their MOU. Thanks. I'll stand for any questions, but that early group had the vision and the foresight to create that organization, and at that time it was about the third one in the state.
Are there any questions of former Councilman Henderson on Main Street?
Yeah, I hope you'll support that. Thanks.
Yes, Councilman, I would like to congratulate you. You're the first person who's officially testified before this city council in their pickle outfit. So you've been playing a lot of pickleball lately? Is that?
No, this is a leftover shirt from Main Street, Roswell. And unfortunately, this is one of their programs that did not fly. It was called the Fiddle and Griddle program. I don't know who was fiddling or who was griddling, but it didn't work.
Oh, well, we might see if they have any more of those shirts. If we could put them for sale as antiques, we could make a little extra money.
I'm going to buy one.
All right. Thank you very much, Counselor. You all and Dee Shirley and Dusty, I mean, it was, if you remember, that was quite a feat to redo Roswell and Main Street. If you remember, there were a number of people around when they went out looking up and down Main Street for old coins and stuff and I guess they found some from the early days, back a long time ago. Yeah, pottery, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Counselor. Next, moving right along to item 2, Mr. Kunkel, would you care to address the council on the Airport Advisory Group?
Good evening. I'd like to thank Mayor Jennings and the Roswell City Council for allowing me time to provide information to the council members reference the Roswell Air Center and the activities of the Airport Advisory Commission. Our intent is to provide a monthly update at the city council meetings. I know that each of you city councilors are aware of the significant importance of the RAC to Roswell and Chaves County in reference to jobs and economic development of our community. This has become increasingly more important due to the significant changes in the agricultural portion of our economy over the past 3 to 5 years. Some of you on the dais are very familiar with what's going on in the ag industry. This is especially true with the downsizing of the local dairy industry. The Three Amigos Dairy will sell their cows later this month. That is about 4,300 milking cows, and they have a total head count of about 11,000 head. That includes babies and heifers. So that's another 35 plus jobs with insurance and benefits that our community will lose. We've gone for from about 50 Pecos Valley dairies to 21 to 22 currently operating dairies. This is just the tip of the iceberg in our local economy from an agricultural perspective. This points out beyond any doubt the significant importance of the Roswell Air Center to the health of our local economy. There's some good points that I want to report on at the RAC. With the recently announced grant from the state, the Meade and Hunt Air Service Development Contract is partially funded. The Airport Commission had discussed and made the recommendation to the airport staff that if the grant funding was received, we agreed to move forward on the contract with Meade and Hunt. Also, those of you that have been out to the airport terminal recently and looked at the parking area, they've seen a marked improvement in the weed control and cleanliness of that parking area over the last several months. This provides a much better first impression of Roswell for air travelers using the RAC. Unfortunately, AVEX, one of our most recent arrivals at tenants at the RAC, has decided to vacate Roswell. This appears to be due to proposed lease rate increases. Other employers at the RAC have also reduced some of their staffing just in the last few weeks. The Airport Advisory Commission has concerns about the lease rate structure. We will be starting our investigation of this structure based upon the airport staff provided lease information at our monthly meeting this coming Tuesday. The Commission will be reviewing the March 2017 Air Center Economic Development Feasibility Study and Action Plan. This is what Roswell and Roswell-Chaves County Economic Development Corp. Had a third party put together in 2017. So we're going to review that because that's one of the most recent documents that we have that provides guidance to the airport and the Airport Commission. We'll also consider the framework for airport authority dated February 25th. That report is fairly small. It's a three-page report. The former city council was handed this and provided this in February of last year. Since that time, this has sat on the shelf. Nothing's been done about it. The people that were involved in that, and I think this is the actual presentation that was provided to the city council. But the people that were involved in that, there were 12 folks on the committee. I'll just read through the names for you. It's a pretty good cross-section of our community. Kyle Armstrong, Matt Martinez, Sean Powell, Bill Williams, Trace Featherstone, City Manager Joe Nebb, Mike Espiritu, Mike McLeod, Amy Call, Chris Cortez, Lori Ordonez, and the county manager at that point, Mr. Stan Riggs. So a pretty high-powered committee. And we'll be looking at our Tuesday meeting next week, we're going to be looking at this, and we hope to bring back to the city council following that probably within the next month. If we don't conclude our report, then it may take a couple months, but we hope to have that back to the city council with some recommendations. Ongoing activities that we will address at our Tuesday, September 13 meeting at 1:30 at City Hall will include the strategic plan discussion, hopefully with an RFP request for a third-party developer for a strategic plan. Airport doesn't have a strategic plan. Spreadsheet discussions of leased properties and lease information provided by the airport staff. A discussion of income analysis provided also by the airport staff. And a discussion of the steering committee recommendations in the February 2021 report that we hope to bring back, as I previously stated, to the council. This concludes my report. If you have any questions for me, I stand for those questions.
Are there questions from members of the council to Mr. Bud Yes, Councilman Best.
Is it possible for you to send both of those reports to all of us, please?
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilman Corn.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kunkel, you mentioned that AVEX is leaving.
Yes.
How many jobs is over there?
They had reduced their staffing significantly. I think they were down to 5 or 6 people here. They originally started after they took over from Mystic with somewhere in the range of 25 to 30. But their development plan changed due to some of the things that they had decided would work better for them, and so they'd reduced staffing significantly.
So this might be a little premature, but whatever rent they were paying then doesn't show up in your financial side of the airport, correct?
Certainly won't show up in the income side, that's correct. Although I'm sure there'll still be some expenses out there.
I recall the discussion maybe a couple of years ago now with the state of New Mexico on one of the buildings at the Air Center. Are you familiar with that?
I am, and I had the airport staff provide some information on that, just so the council understands. From the time that building went vacant until last month of August, the city forewent $322,000 in rent that the taxpayer didn't receive.
Were there any jobs associated with that left because of this discussion between the city and the state, or did they just relocate here in the community?
They relocated onto West 2nd Street at the old Bama Plaza facility.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Kunkel.
Thank you. Other questions, Councilman Arnold?
No, actually, luckily, Councilwoman Best asked it for me.
Oh, okay. Councilman Foster.
So, going back to the building that was vacant for this, the state vacated, what was the amount that you said we
Lost.
missed out on?
$322,000.
That was the rent that they had agreed to pay, and then they pulled out, correct? Because they signed the lease and then they pulled out.
If I'm not mistaken, they signed the lease, and then the city, instead of giving them a 5-year lease, which they wanted, the city wanted to give them a 1-year lease, and so yes, they
No.
declined to exercise that.
Your memory doesn't recall correctly. We gave them a 2-year lease with 3 1-year extensions. So there was 5-year lease in there, and they signed that lease, and then they pulled out.
Okay?
So, and the 300,000 or whatever you said we lost was only because they hadn't been paying that amount prior. Do you know what they were paying prior to that?
Between $7 and $8 a square foot.
It was more like $5.90 a square foot that they
Okay.
were paying. And so the city was subsidizing the state. You know, it gets to a point where the city should not be subsidizing the state. It should be the other way around. And so now they're where? Located on West 2nd?
Yes.
So a landlord is now actually collecting rent from them, correct?
That's correct.
And he's able to use that to pay property tax, correct?
It will partially pay property taxes, yes.
How much property tax did we pay on the building that the state was renting from us?
Since it's municipally owned, 0.
Exactly. So now the state's actually in helping economic development. Before they were just living off the city.
And likely you'd have to run a cash flow analysis to determine whether the lost potential income equates to what you just said. My guess is that lost potential income is still greater than the amount of taxes that they weren't paying because it's a municipally owned property.
Well, and the fact is, they're the ones that signed the lease and then executed the exit clause on it. So it wasn't the city kicking them out. So saying that we would have collected that amount of money isn't correct. It was tying the city's hands to 5 years, but it would be at that higher rate, and then they decided that they could operate at a lot better in a smaller area, and it's cheaper. And so,
Do you have any idea how long they occupied that building?
for a very long time,
10 years?
I believe
Push 20.
closer to 20.
Okay, so 20 years. If
That we were-
if a state entity occupies a facility for that long, they likely would have desired to continue to occupy that building. So something happened. I don't know what it might have been, but something happened to have the state change their mind.
And can you tell me right now who's renting it?
I think there's somebody from the fire department, from the renovation that's going on at the fire department, is leasing a portion of that, and then apparently Ascent Aviation intends to lease a portion of that.
So now we actually have a company coming in that is economic development and is helping our town. So that's the thing. The state was tying down a building that they weren't using the full amount of that building, and it was causing us we couldn't bring it and show it to people for economic development purposes. So, yeah, I can understand you can make up numbers and say we lost this much revenue. We didn't, because they're the ones that pulled out of it. So we offered it to them.
I respectfully disagree.
Well, you can, but we actually signed the lease, and they're the ones that exited the lease. So I yield.
Any further discussion on this? Yes, Councilman Represso.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this thing on? You know, I have a hard time understanding how the city can be subsidizing a state entity when the state has been paying, what was it, for 20 years? Roughly for 20 years, paying their rent. That meant that the city was receiving income. And so when I talk about subsidizing, to me, that means we're giving the state money in some form or shape or another. And I don't understand how we can make the argument that the city was subsidizing the state when they were willing to or at least what I remember was that they brought forward a contract that says that they were willing to rent or lease that building for 5 years with 4 years options, if I remember correctly. And then the council made an amendment to it, which made the state pull out. And so, yeah, I do agree. I think we have lost quite a bit of money. I'm not exactly sure what the amount of money is, but the city has lost some revenue by not renting that building. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Foster, for a second time.
The only correction I'd want, the city didn't lose the revenue. It was the airport fund that lost the revenue, correct? Nobody, is Josh not there? All the rent collected at the airport goes to the airport fund, so the city doesn't spend it on anything but the airport. And so, yes, the airport fund, and you're correct, the state came to us with a 5-year lease with 4 more 5-year options on it. So they wanted it for 25 more years. Gave them they could have had 5 more years, but they wanted 25 years tied up. I don't see us wanting to subsidize, and subsidizing is exactly that when they're not paying the fair market rent. So, thank you. I yield.
Okay, any further comments? I would just say one thing. I happened to be in the meeting room that night. I know a little bit about this building because my daughter worked there for a long time and worked for the Department of Health. The Department of Health, when they leased that building, I believe they leased it for 20 years, and the city didn't put an escalator clause in it. And so their lease was like for $6 a square foot. But 20 years before that, we had a lot of property, and it was in that facility there were 25 or 27 healthcare professionals that were probably paid 75 to 100 and some thousand apiece. I guess I'm just going back and looking at it because I knew a lot of the people in there. The state had done a lot of remodeling in there while my daughter was working there. Courtney shredded documents in there and documents, and she worked there. She's a challenged individual, but it was employment that she'd gotten from after she finished working at Toboso Los Positos. And it was a pretty nice facility. I'm glad that the Department of Health did not choose to move. They could move anywhere in the 9-county region that they serve in. They could have moved to Clovis or Alamogordo, Artesia. They could have moved anywhere had they chose to do it. They had done a lot of improvements on that building, and they did want them to stay there. The state generally doesn't do short-term leases, and I've been a victim of one of their short-term leases, and most people won't rent to them short-term on a state engineer's building that my brothers and I own, my siblings that I own. So in looking at, the state liked that facility because of its location, and they were happy to stay there. It was not the state's contention was it was not their fault. There was not a consumer price or CPI adjustment in their rent that when they signed the lease back to 20 years earlier. They didn't have any qualms with putting a CPI in the new lease. They negotiated for a long time, came to about a $12 a square foot, as I recall. And they were happy with that, but they didn't want a short-term lease. They did want a lease that was longer. I think any option, if you'd had 2 years or whatever, or up to 10, usually the state likes to have their people in and get them in place so their improvements that they pay for as they go through making their buildings functional are still there for a whole 10 years are there. And that was when I talked to the, as I recall, the lady running that, might have been Mrs. Redden, or no, Mrs. Redden just ran the COVID plan, I think. But anyway, I talked with their director about that, and they liked the facility, and they did want to stay there. And I think now they're in the process of either building a new building or moving to another building in town that they'll spin up to. But it was, I don't know about subsidizing anybody. It was great to have those buildings filled up out at the base, which were vacant at that time. The fire department has moved in. I know the fire department moved in afterwards because we have a fire station that's somewhat unusable. We've never been briefed on that. I wish we would, but be briefed on when that's going to be back in order. In fact, realistically, if you look, we haven't been briefed on the building on the Security National Bank or the old bank building where we're supposed to move to. There hadn't been anybody turn a lick of work, it didn't look like, over there in months. And yet we were supposed to be in last December. Somewhere along the line, we probably ought to get a handle on real estate if it, and if we're not going to move into the SunWest Bank building, maybe we should move back. There were some plans, it was my understanding, there were plans to move down the street on Richardson next to the Miniatures Museum. I don't know where we'd park if we did that. But somewhere, I think some of we might have to look at some of the overcrowding that we have in that old building next door that we use, our annex building, I guess is what you'd call it. The people in there are pretty crowded in there, so I'd hope we would look at that. But in any event, we should be briefed on our properties that we have, whether it be whether AVEX, Ascent, Mystic, any of those terms. We haven't been briefed on any of the activities or the lease arrangements, other than everybody seems to know about a 400% increase everybody got, but we've never been briefed on what's happened in 5 months. We haven't been briefed on, have we gone from 400% to 300 to 200 to 100, or are they just leaving? We should be briefed on this stuff. I think every one of each council member should have a knowledge of where we are and where we're going. And we haven't heard anything. So, I do appreciate it, Mr. Kunkel. I know you've done a lot of work there in leasing and or properties in New Mexico. You know what they're worth and in your appraisal business, and I would just like to thank you for that and volunteering for the Airport Advisory Task Force. And I hope we can work about keeping our employees here and the people who are employed on our facilities and get the leases worked out. In the near future, we can, your committee, I hope that they can help us negotiate leases that are agreeable and in the fair market value range, that we can go ahead and keep our tenants happy, as well as develop and repair the numerous deficiencies that our airbase has, our air center has.
That's, Mr. Mayor, that's one of the things that I had suggested that we're about to do in my report to you. So I didn't think I was going to be divisive on this at all, but I responded to the question that was asked of me with the information that I had. I'd like to thank each of you for your attention. Please know that you're invited to our commission meeting this coming Tuesday at 1:30 at City Hall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Somebody will put that on the list over there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kunkel. Thank you very much, and thank your commission. Hopefully we'll see you Tuesday. Okay, next we have, on the agenda, we have consent items, and so if I could, Councilman Perry.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent items that are presented, which would be the event task list for the Roswell Volunteer Value Program guidelines, the biannual MOU between the City of Roswell, Main Street Roswell, and New Mexico Main Street, the approval of the scope of work on the 316 North Richardson building by the Community Development Department, and the two leases at building number 55 and building number 1670. Also the resolutions that are listed here, the weeds condemnation, the resolution for the Water Trust Board application for the rehabilitating of Country Club water reservoirs, the resolution in support of the Water Trust Board application for Hobson Road flood prevention measures, the resolution to approving the determination of uncollectible accounts for the removal of accounts receivable in the amount of $451,140.94, the resolution in support of the biannual MOU between the City of Roswell, Main Street Roswell, and New Mexico Main Street, and our resolution for the financial commitment for the to fund the Roswell Transit for the federal fiscal year of October 1, 2023 through September 30, 2024. the lodgers request funding for $4,725 on a reimbursable basis at 50% of eligible expenses for the Roswell Symphony Orchestra at spring season, and the minutes of August 11.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Councilman Perry to approve the consent items, which are on our items 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and item 17 on our agenda. Item 5 will be moved to 18A, so we can discuss that item.
Second.
There's a second by Council.
Are we using the boxes now? Are they working good?
That's what I understood. Are we using the boxes for the motions also and the voting?
I'm not,
Yes, but because this isn't on part of the agenda to approve the consent items as an item, so we can't vote for this one on the vote box.
okay.
I'm sorry about the confusion.
So this will be a voice vote or roll call on all of it?
It could be a voice vote.
Okay, a voice vote. So we have a motion by Councilman Perry, seconded by Councilman Hildebrand, and we have Councilman Orpressa to speak on the issue.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I just need get a clarification. If this is the process that we're going to follow from this point forward, if anybody signs up to discuss items on the consent agenda, are they going to be able to discuss it before we take the action to approve the consent?
That's my intention to have that happen. It happened, that's why we had Mr. Henderson in here earlier. He is on the consent item, and that's why he spoke this morning.
I just want to make sure that if people sign up to speak on a consent agenda item, that they will be allowed to speak on it and not for us to take action on it and then say, sorry, we already taken action on it.
No, Councilman Impressa, that, we do want to have all the public input we can get. We only had 2 people sign up to speak. Mr. Kunkel and former Councilman Steve Henderson were the 2 items that we had to speak on today. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll. Or do you want the roll or you want a voice?
We can do a voice vote.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, the motion passes. We are now on item 18, new business. 17 was approved in this last motion. Sorry. And Resolution 22-50, adopt a resolution updating the Recreation Department fee structure. Councilman Orpressa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move for adoption of Resolution 22-50, which updates the Recreation Department fee structure for memberships and programs and approves a comprehensive list of current recreation fees.
We have a motion by Councilman Orpressa. We have a second by, is there a second somewhere?
Second.
Councilman Halverson. Council Lady Halverson. Okay, so now we're on discussion. Excuse me. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. I'm Colette Hall, Recreation Director.
As you recall, I brought forth these, this resolution and these fees in the last meeting. And if we can go ahead and go up one more. At that meeting, we were asked to change the veteran and military discount from 10% to 20%, revisit the sports spectator admission, and consider a membership rate if two seniors sign up at the same time. All right, these are the current fees, and if you'll go forward one, there we go. All right, so these are the proposed fees. And if you will look in the parentheses or what the current fees are so that you can compare them. And I went through all of these last time. Our quarterly membership is based on 2.5 months of the monthly. Annual membership is based on 5 months of the monthly. Family membership is up for 6 people and is priced based on 1 adult, 2 children. Any rec center membership is good for the adult center membership, and the adult center only membership is for the entire year. So what we did is we combined fees to make this a very easy fee structure, and that it includes the entire building. You don't have to just purchase one for the gym side and one for the pool side. This was combined after we went through and looked at what fees sold and what did not. So if you will see on the circle, on the red circle, we did change and we are proposing the 20% for the veteran discount. These are our daily fees. I do not believe we had, there was no discussion on these, nothing that you asked me to do on these. We think these are very comparable to what's around town. For example, NIMI charges $3 for their admission as well. So we feel like this is a good daily fee rate. Here's what your memberships will get you, the benefits: access to the cardio room, open gym, access to the pool, access to the fitness room, access to the adult center, and as I said, it will also get you access into the adult center to do the billiards room, hospitality, access to the cardio group fitness, open studios, and all drop-in activities. The potential loss could be less than $2,000, and this is based on if we don't get any new memberships, which I don't think will be the case. Okay, so we did come down on fees, so I'm presenting what the potential loss could be if we just kept the same amount of memberships. But I'm really hopeful and really think that we can sell more memberships. So the remaining fees, we propose that the group cardio fitness be included in the memberships. I think this is a good deal, and it should be. It used to be $5, so we're going to include that. Proposing that recreation set the fees for classes with no fee increasing more than 20% in a year. We need the ability to fluctuate with the market. And I gave the example last time of the lifeguarding class, how it was $300, and that was just too much for coming out of COVID and the job market and that kind of thing. We had to bring it down so that we could get lifeguards. So we need to be able to keep fluctuating. So here is currently our spectator admission is $1 per person and $7 per person per season. So what we proposed after the recommendation and after talking with council is that the spectator admission is $2 per adult or $10 per adult per season, which is 10 games, which is $1 per game if you buy the whole packet. And kids now 12 and under are free. Okay, so it is just the adult admission. Before, it was anybody that came in paid that spectator fee. And so we have dropped that to adults only, and that the kids can come in for free to watch their siblings or to watch their friends. Okay, it was a request of considering a discounted membership if 2 seniors were to sign up at the same time. We are not recommending this due to the fact that the senior membership fee is already an excellent value at the proposed $95, which is $5 lower than the current senior aquatic and $45 lower than the current senior combo. Staff would like to see this, how this new rate is received before discounting. And plus, we also, it was really hard for us to distinguish what would we call a couple. So if, when this was first proposed, And we really didn't know if a couple could it be roommates? Could it, does it have to be man, woman, or how would that look? So we thought it would be best if we could just see how this rate does first, and maybe this discount could be during a membership drive to say if you referred somebody, then we could look at a discount for you or for that person, that kind of thing. Okay, the General Services Committee voted to refer 3-1 this resolution to full City Council with recommendation at their August 24th, 2022 meeting. Staff recommendation is consider adopting Resolution 2250, updating Recreation Department fee structure for memberships and programs, and to approve the comprehensive list, Exhibit A of the current recreation fees. And I'll stand for questions.
Questions from members? We have Council Lady Halverson, please.
First, I want to, excuse me, thank you for your work on this. I know it's been frustrating, but I do think I'm pretty confident that you're going to make up that $2,000. It's not going to be a loss. You're going to actually come ahead, I think, because with the lower membership fees, I think you're going to get more members.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Hall, I see, it was a request to lower the, shall I call, admission fee for
Spectator?
activities.
Okay.
And the committee actually raised the fee from $1 to $2. And I would like to know what that revenue difference, you were able to tell us what the revenue difference is under the other fee structures, but what is the revenue difference by this item here going from $1 to $2 in children for free?
Okay, I believe that it's going to not affect it because now we are not charging for the children to come in. So before, when we were getting both of those admission fees, I'd have to get back with you on exactly how much we bring in a year, but that is going to be cut because we won't be charging. And plus, we're it's going to be, I would think that there will be a loss because of the fact that we're doing that still as $1 for the adults if you buy the whole 10-pack. So I think there may be a minimal loss on those fees because of the fact that we are not charging the children.
Mr. Fuentes, if you could just give us a report someday later of what this impact is, just to make us knowledgeable of that, I'd appreciate that.
You betcha. I have it. I'm sorry, I just did not
fine.
bring that with
That's fine.
me. But yeah, that's easy to get for you.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Ms. Hall, I was just curious, you seem to have done a really good job of wrapping up those two institutions and people who do have lapidary or whatever with the adult center. I think that's real good. Was there any thought, I don't know where we are, the only other thing I can think of that the city does out there would be for someone who does clay at the museum. And I didn't know that's about the only activity I think that the city actively pushes. And I didn't know if you brought them in under that or not. It'd just be something, I wouldn't want to delay what this is. I think that there's just a few people over there that do that. But it would be something if in that we could extend the use of the, what do we have left? We've got the, you've got the zoo or the Spring River Park left, and you have the museum left, which are basically what I guess you have the convention center be outside of that too. But as far as real group activities, where groups would get together would be the zoo or the museum where they might go to. I don't know about if you could add that or not, but I think you've done a good job at listening to the council, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
What you've done.
Thank you.
So thank you. Council Lady Best.
Yes, I would just like you to know that the activities at the museum are totally separate from what Ms. Hall does. Same with the zoo, so each department is separate. So if you're a Facebook fan, like I am, always getting in trouble on it, they advertise at least 2 to 3 times a week of every activity that's going on at the recreation center, the museum. They put up their clay just last week. You've done the outside pool, the inside pool. You've explained when they open, when they don't open, so forth and so on. So everything is out there. And as we were speaking during our dog event, 46% is on Facebook of our back and forth with the public, and 15% is in the newspaper. I don't know if we want to try the newspaper, but that's only 15%, and that would be kind of a waste of our advertising when we could use it on social media, or even maybe the radio is my opinion. But the zoo's separate, the museum's separate, the recreation center's separate. We did put the adult center in with the recreation center because that's what Ms. Hall does, and that's what she was hired for. Am I correct, Juanita?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to interject and just let you know that the fees for these other entities, the other divisions within enrichment services are going through general services. So next month, you'll be seeing the zoo. The following month, you'll be seeing the museum. So those will be forthcoming to you as well. And I've made a note for the clay class for museum, and Caroline Brooks and I will have that discussion as we prepare that fee structure for you guys. Thank you.
And those monies go back into each one of those. The clay goes back into the art, the zoo goes back into the zoo on all of our fees. Am I correct?
I would have to defer to Mr. Fuentes and Ms. Davis. My understanding is enrichment services, they just kind of help offset some of the operating cost of the expenses that we have to operate the
But
service.
it goes back into
But
it. Okay.
it's the same pot of money because it's all general fund money, but it has different divisions.
Okay,
But I'm
thank
going
you.
to defer to the financial experts on that.
Thank you.
Any further comments from Ms. Hall? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hall. Thank you. I think you did a good job on that. Thank you. And of course, that doesn't, I shouldn't probably say that because people need to vote. So we have a motion by Councilman Orpresha, second by Council Lady Halverson on Resolution 22-50, updating the Recreation Department fee structure. If the clerk could call the roll, or do you want to push the buttons?
We can do a roll call.
You want a roll call? Okay. Would clerk call the roll?
Counselor Moore? Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa? No. Counselor Heldenbrand?
No.
Counselor Foster?
Yes.
Counselor Korn? Yes. Counselor Arnold?
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes, it was a yes.
Thank you. Counselor Best?
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez? Yes. Counselor Halverson?
Yes.
Mayor, motion passes 8-2.
Okay, by a vote of 8 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, item 18 is duly passed. Next, we will go to item 18A, which is item 5 in your book, and it's to approve $203,950 from the American Rescue Fund Act to be used to install the air conditioner scrubbers. We have Councilman Orpresa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of up to $203,950 of the American Rescue CARES Act Fund to be used to purchase and install air scrubbers for the Roswell Public Library.
We have a motion by Councilman Orpresa. Do we have a second? Second. Who was the second? Councilman Moore was the second. Council Lady Moore was the second. Okay, well, now for discussion. For item 5, do we have anyone care to discuss this issue? Councilman Arnold, Council Lady Arnold, please.
Yes, I had some actual questions regarding the actual American Rescue CARES Act fund, but I also would love to hear if Ms. Enid could actually give us a breakdown on the history of why we're needing the air scrubbers. Will this go forward? Okay, there.
Okay, now we got it.
The air scrubbers take contamination out of the air, including viruses, bacteria, pollen, dust, mold. The library has all of those in them, from books, dust, common cold, flu. What we're looking for is a way to keep the library open and our community safe during times of flu, common cold, COVID still continues. So when we were looking at that, this was what was recommended to us. The air scrubbers are a little bit different than some of the other ones that you might see. A lot of the other ones we first looked at were the room got contaminated, so we bring in air scrubbers. They're very loud and they clean the air, and then you have to move them out. These would be permanently installed in the library and certain, strategic places in the library. We were mostly concerned with the children's area because we do programming for children that are under 2, and we don't want to put masks on them. So we are looking at the meeting rooms where we do our programming. Now that we have a play and learn area and they're using those, we want to keep that area clear. Places where everyone comes to the front desk, we want to keep that area very clear. The places, new books where people go, the Bondurant room, so we don't have to close that up, and our other smaller meeting room for about 12 people. So we were looking at those places where people are sitting, using the building for more than just going into the shelves and finding a book and leaving, but they would be sitting, studying, having a program, spending time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Councilor Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, actually it does. I kind of wanted to know the breakdown because I did miss it at the General Services meeting. I just had to walk out right before you started speaking, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. I'm always an advocate of the library. It's been a sanctuary since I was 5, and I would probably try to give you the Taj Mahal if I could, but at this point my actual concern is with the American Rescue Act funds. I have requested more detail on them and have not received them, and so I would like a breakdown of those funds at this time.
Sure, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Arnold. So the American Rescue Fund, so the city received $11,751,501. That's how much we received in American Rescue Funds. And I'll just let you know that we just received, I believe today, the second half of the American Rescue money, so that will be deposited in the fund. Now, out of those 11 million, the guidelines do allow us to claim up to $10 million in lost revenue, which we have done. And that money is set aside. And again, at whatever appropriate point in time, the council, the mayor council, and with the manager will have that discussion about using of those funds. But because we have an additional 1.7 million, those funds can be used for certain particular allocated uses. For example, the council authorized the use of 1,292,551.73 for the utility write-offs. So that is taken off of the 1.7. So with that, there's a balance of the $458,000, which is what this particular request would qualify for. So the remaining funds for that category of the 1.7, we have to use it according to one of those category that is allowed by the American Rescue Guidelines. And because we have to report all of the different projects that we're using those funds for. We've already allocated, we claimed the $10 million in lost revenue. That's already been taken care of. We've addressed $1.2 million of the $1.7 million. And now this request will start chipping away Once we've used all of those $1.7 million to, in essence, we have already completed our reporting and our use of those funds. But we have to be able to use the remaining balance of those 1.7 on an eligible category. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have that list of eligible uses, but I can certainly provide that to you.
Okay, actually, that was very helpful, thank you. Yeah, if you could get me the list of, or kind of get me some more information on the guidelines and what was requested of us on that American Rescue Act. Also, I would actually like to ask Mike Matthews, or since he's in for the city manager, if do you guys actually have a breakdown? Were these funds, the outside 10 million, were they already broken, I mean, committed to something else in the previous council?
Mr. Mayor and Councilor, I know there were in prior discussions, there was a recommendation or discussion on possible uses for those funds, but nothing has been set as far as formally approving a particular use of those funds. I believe that's still up to the mayor, council, with the manager for further discussion. But we can certainly provide the information that was presented in the past, just to give you an idea of what are some of the items that were discussed.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was asking for, was like possibly a workshop or something actually breaking down, because before you know it, then all the money's gone and we can't actually, say where it went. So I would like a little more structure around this.
And Councilor, and I will add that those funds are set aside in a special fund. And they're not allocated for any particular use without city council action.
Sure, I understand that, but I would like a little bit of structure around
Yes,
it.
ma'am. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Council Lady Best.
Yes, I'd like just to bring to attention that on August 30th at 11:13 a.m., there was an email sent out to all the counselors from Joe Nebb, I believe, speaking of the initial plans for the American Rescue Plan Fund, explaining there were 3 attachments, explaining the early buildings of what we were going through and what our thoughts were. But I just wanted to make sure that there was something out there, and it was sent to all the counselors. Thank you. It was August 30th, 2022, 11:13 a.m. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have, next we have Council Lady Halverson, please.
So I had a question. We don't have any other requests to spend that additional $458,000. Is that correct?
Well, again, the balance that's remaining right now is the 458. If this is approved, then it will bring it down to the 200,000 level.
Is there a deadline we have to spend that money, like a grant or anything?
We still have about 2 years. I mean, so we have plenty of time.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Halverson. Next we have Councilor Hildebrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so everyone's aware on this council, there was $10 million that was available for lost revenue.
Yes.
That is not $10 million that's left. It's $7 million. It's $7 million.
That is, I stand corrected, Mr. Mayor and Councilor, you are correct. We did use $2.8 million, which is, the remaining is 7.1. I stand corrected, you are correct.
Right. I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we do not have $10 million sitting over in a fund, that we only have, it's down to $7 million. And Councilor Best, I appreciate a list that was prepared by former Councilor Roebuck, and I do agree that we need to update that list and look at what impact we can do with that $7 million. That's an old list that was primary. I think it was trying to address how we could spend the $11 million, and now we're down to $7 million, and I believe that this council should take it upon themselves to review that and see what impact that we can have with the $7 million, and we just don't, I think it just doesn't dwindle away in other areas. So I recommend that we figure out how we're going to spend that $7 million. And how we do that as a council, where we need to start with that, and maybe it's a workshop, I don't know. It's not just my idea, it's not just the mayor's idea, it's a collective idea of how the citizens of this community would like to have that $7 million have a meaningful impact. I've always looked at this rescue money as my Uncle Louis left me an inheritance. And what am I going to do with my inheritance? Am I going to do something foolish, or am I going to do something that has impact? One time we get this largest sum of money, and that's what I think the council needs to address, is how do we want to spend it, and how do the citizens of this community want to spend it? So, I yield.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on this? Okay, thank you. Now we're back. We're through with one. Ms. Costley, any discussions of Ms. Costley? I would just like to, I had a great deal of thoughts about this before, about this particular item, on why we had to spend that much money on the library. But when I started thinking about it, I mean, really, that's probably the only place in town that a lot of people can go to get information, and it's probably really as vital to keeping that source of information as free from germs that we can do for people who don't have a newspaper. Nobody gets newspaper anymore anyway, almost, it seems like. And so newspapers or TVs or whatever, it's a lot of people's only source of information. So I really think that keeping that area free of germs is certainly probably a pretty good idea, to make sure people have free access to information in our community. So, is there any further comments on this item? Seeing none, okay, we have a motion by Councilman Orpresa and a second by Council Lady Halverson. Oh, excuse me, Council Lady Moore. Sorry, I'm on the wrong line again. Okay. So, if the clerk could call the roll.
That one is a voice vote.
Voice vote? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, item 5 has duly passed the council. Okay, next we have,
Mayor and City Council, thank you very much.
oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Counselor and Mayor and councilors, go ahead and do your vote box as well.
You want to put it back up? How do you want to vote? And Savino needs to push, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we go to item 19. Councilman Perry.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the city attorney terms and employment and of employment and job description as provided.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilor Perry and a second by Council Lady Halverson. Yes, Mr. Matthews.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll be presenting very briefly this item tonight for the city manager who's out of town, but he did instruct me to let you know that he did work with the mayor to establish this contract. He is in full support of it. He feels very strongly that it's placed on the proper grade, and he asked me to relay that to you this evening before you start your discussion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of any of the council members? Councilman Foster.
My question was, how did we come about When we spoke in August, I asked the question, what was our salary we were going to be looking at? And the answer I got from the mayor was around 100,000. And now I'm looking at a contract for 135,000. The other portion I have is, that's not even the cost, because currently, when you look through the compensation, we're paying for car allowance and a cell phone, correct? That's in the contract.
I don't believe there's a car allowance. It's mileage. So if I had to drive to Albuquerque on for a federal court date, I'd get mileage like any other city employee. And the cell phone allowance is not going to be cash. I'm simply going to get issued a city cell phone. Please feel free to call whenever.
Well, and that's currently, do we give our current attorneys cell phones?
It was my understanding from when Mr. Nebb and I went through this package, this was a standard thing that was a standard agreement, and it wasn't any change from the existing, what was offered, the existing personnel was my understanding. I don't think anybody asked for anything special. The reason that you have to have one thing, that your attorney has to always be available for this council and for the city manager to contact at any time they choose. And that's one of the reasons why the city paid for the cell phone, is that it's kind of like a requirement, like Mr. Matthews has or anybody else, they have to be available for contact. And that was my understanding of his comments with him. But Mr. Nebb said this is exactly where we were. We came, the years of experience and the things that Mr. Antema has, or where we came up with the salary schedule, it was off the same salary schedule that everybody else, all the other attorneys were on, was my understanding. And but Mr. Nebb had the contract, and so we didn't do anything out of the ordinary for Mr. Antema that we didn't do for everybody else. That's years of experience for what determined the salary.
I'll pass this out to the council. It's the actual what we've paid our city attorneys for the last 9 years, if y'all are interested in knowing. And it doesn't come close to the 135,000. But my question still is, whose mobile phone do we pay for currently?
There's a pretty long list of department heads throughout the city that they have an option. They can get a stipend for their cell phone, depending on what's required. And it goes anywhere from, I believe, $60 up to $95 a month, depending on if they have to have internet service and stuff like that to answer emails, get voice messages and things like that. Others choose to have a city provide them a cell phone, so they carry 2 cell phones, their personal cell phone and a city cell phone at all times. So there's 2 different ways you can do this.
All right. Well, when you're going through this, there's a lot more cost than just the 135,000. The next question I have is professional growth. In the contract, 4.2. Professional development travel, the city agrees to pay for travel and a subsistence expense of attorney for professional and official travel in meetings to adequately continue the professional development of the attorney to pursue necessary official functions of the city to the extent of permitted and approved in the budget. My next question is, who approves the this? Is it going to be because according to our statement before or in August, he's not going to be reporting to our city manager. So who approves this? Does it have to come to council for approval?
Councilor Foster, I can't speak to who that should go to it, like I said, but I know our city manager has encouraged all of our employees to not only participate in their professional services groups and boards throughout the state and nation, but also to take over them committees and boards. So if you're a member of for the example, the fire chiefs on the state fire board, he expects him to not only be on that board, but try to get a voting role or a membership on the leadership of that board. I'm sure he would fully support our city attorneys maintaining their CEUs, and as they do last week at the municipal league, many of our employees attended that to get credits and go through their different groups and stuff. So
Well-
as far as Hess getting permission to go, like I said, I have the information. I wasn't part of the negotiations with the mayor or the city manager. City manager was just very adamant to me before he left town that he fully supports this and feels strongly that it's placed on the appropriate grade.
Okay. Well, my major question with that one is, I want to know who approves it, because I do recall years ago, we had a superintendent of her schools who had supposedly said no more field trips, and then the next month asked the school board to pay for his travel to Italy so he could attend a conference. And that's my question.
I'd happily go to Italy if you're offering, Counselor.
Well, I understand, but that's my problem is, if we don't have a chain of command who approves this.
So, Counselor, this is always budget dependent. It's going to affect, it will be in the budget resolution you pass as part of legal's budget. This is a standard thing, so I fully hope that the budget we have is going to allow the deputy city attorney to take care of all of his continuing education and bar dues in the same way that mine are.
Well, and I agree with it, but that's my question is, since we've stepped out of what we've normally done, I need to know who approves it. The next question is, I was under the understanding that since you were being appointed for one salary, and you wouldn't have budget salary adjustments over the years until the next time you were appointed. Then I read this, you're eligible for COLAs and all the step increases that everybody else is. So now you're an employee instead of an appointed. And so that's another question I have. How is it that you're getting all the benefits of being an employee, but yet you're in an appointed position?
And Councilor Foster, and I appreciate that, and I apologize that I'm not able to answer your questions because I wasn't a part of that negotiation or preparing this document.
All right. And then the last part of it that really kind of bugged me was, I remember you standing before us saying that you were appointed by Governor Governor Martinez, and that you understood that when her administration changed, that your job was no longer there. Did you have a golden parachute with the state?
No, because I left the state before the end of her administration. As far as are you referring to the severance provision?
Yes.
Sure. That simply got brought in. We used the template of the manager's contract as the chief appointee of the city, and that was in there. I said, should we keep it? He had no problem with that. That said, if that's something you feel needs to be struck, you can propose an amendment to the contract right now. I prefer it in there, but I understand if a majority of you don't want it in there. I'm not a firm believer that attorneys are due severance, but as a negotiating position, if it was on the table, it'd be silly of me not to ask for it.
Well, and that's my next question. What committee saw this? What committee saw this?
There was, I don't believe, did we take it to legal? We didn't take it to legal, so nobody saw it. This was a contract that was agreed with, that Mr. Nebb and I and worked out, looked at about the salary schedules and what was in the contract. In Mr. Nebb's contract, we looked at that. That's what he wanted, Mr. Nebb wanted to use. We looked at that contract. We looked at it, we worked it, we presented it to Mr. Eintema, and the three of us came up with this agreement. And it was certainly, I thought Mr. Neb worked in good faith. I think I worked in good faith. I think Mr. Eintema worked in good faith about coming up with a contract. It was, but we used Mr. Neb's contract as the base.
Yeah.
And that was because Mr. Neb was also appointed in one of the same like positions that we had. And so I thought that seemed like it made good sense to me. Now, it did not go to legal, but we had a vote on this council to hire this individual, and we had a vote that passed, and then we had to work out the details of the contract to finish out the agreement to come here to be approved, and that's how we got together to do that. So that's how we worked it out. It did not go back to legal because it was already approved by the council to hire Mr. Eintema beginning September 1st. And that was the vote that was passed here, and so that's what we did.
Well, that gets back to the point where it doesn't look like everything. We're supposed to do everything in the sunlight, and in our meetings. And to negotiate a contract, we normally have that with our city manager to negotiate contracts, but we also have to approve them, and usually it goes through a committee to approve them. And since it's not, I'll step back and let others speak on this if they want, but my recommendation is to send it back to a committee to go through this, because yes, I do agree the severance should probably be taken out. No, I'm not putting it in as an amendment yet, but I'm just saying a lot of this work the question should have been answered in a committee instead of having to do this in a full city council meeting. So I'll yield for now.
Yes, and Councilman Foster, I would just point out that I think you said this is not how we normally do things. I would just point out to you that I think in the laws of the state of New Mexico, it allows for the appointment process to work different than how you had been perceiving or how you had done it in the past. And I think if what you were doing was unlawful in the past, that you shouldn't have done it that way. This is a way that I believe is lawful within the laws of the state of New Mexico as it's described, and that's exactly what happened.
Mayor, you did have a good question.
We didn't have Ms. Davies. We appointed Ms. Davies. Everything was fine, and there wasn't any objections to her when I appointed her. Same way. I mean, Mr. Neeb was involved in her salary schedule and everything else. So I don't think that there's any difference between Mr. Eintema or Ms. Davies, and that's where we go. Councilman?
Your statement was that what we did was illegal in the past.
Well, sir,
That was your statement, right?
I'm just saying that the way it was described on how people were appointed, and when we have had the discussions in the past about that, the law specifically states what the appointment powers of the mayor are.
And it says you may
And the
appoint.
appointment powers of the mayor are there, and they were exercised, and it was maybe if it was a 6-5 vote, there's no doubt about that, but it was exercised in due course, so this council was authorized to hire an attorney, and we worked out a contract agreement with the city manager, Mr. Eintema, and myself, and that's where we were. We were under the direction of this council by a vote of this council. I know you were on the other side, but that's unfortunate for you, but it was fortunate for the other 6 people that we had this agreement. The agreement has been made and done, and I think that's where we are.
I agree, and I agree on the appointment. That's okay. But that night, we were told 100,000. That night, we were told that and so that's what it was agreed to. in that area. Now we're getting this at 135, and it's not all the cost, because now there's going to be step increases, there's going to be everything else, and it doesn't stand even close to what we've paid an attorney in the past. So either we have been really underpaying attorneys, because even years of, I think Mr. Holloman graduated in 11 from New Mexico UNM, from law school, so he had more years of experience, and Mr. Itema has 9 years. So if you start looking at that and start looking at what we paid, either we've really underpaid our city attorney prior, or we are suddenly having to jump up and pay way more. So either way, I think that this doesn't fall, and even if Mr. Nebb says he thinks it does, that's fine. I don't see how it figures when what we've been paying our other attorneys. And what we were told in August is going to be around 100,000. Or even if it was taking Mr. Patterson's salary of 124,000, we're 11,000 above. How is it that it's an 11,000 raise just stepping into a position when Mr. Patterson had worked for us for almost 4 years? Those are the questions I have, and I think they're good questions. And if this council keeps saying that we're conservatives, and we're conservative, but we're signing, I said then we were signing a blank check, and you've proved it. It's 35,000 more than what we were told. That's why I believe this should have gone to a committee. I don't think all this working out a contract and working out a salary is something that we need to work here, but if we do, we can start making amendments. But this will be a lot longer process at this level than if it was at a committee. And again, I'll yield to hear my other counselors what they think.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Orpresa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the information that we have before us is information for the last 2 attorneys. But there's previous attorneys before them as well. And before the city elected to bring in a staff member as an attorney, we had a contract with another attorney that, if my memory serves me correctly, we were paying over $200,000 as contract. And so, and if I look at new staff coming in that Mr. Nebb has brought in, a lot of them do not start at step 1. Mr. Nebb has that authority to start them based on their experience. And so I know a couple of them are at least making $100,000. And I don't think that there's a step 1 in the salary range that starts you at $100,000. So we have a couple that have been hired that haven't started at step 1. They have negotiated with, and I'm assuming that they have negotiated with the city manager to be at the step that they are right now. But they're new staff to the city. And as far as the contract is concerned, yeah, I did look at the contract, and I saw an identical contract that we have with the mayor. And so if the argument is that and I'm going to call him Hess because I can't say the last name, but if we're going to say that he now is a staff member instead of a contractual member of the city, then that argument should be applied to the city manager as well, because the city manager has those same items on his contract. He was brought in at 154, I believe, and now he is making upwards of 185, if I'm not mistaken, because of the steps that he has gone through. And I brought up this issue last month as well. And so I don't see that if we're going to take away that kind of wording on Hess's contract, then we should be looking at the contract for the city manager as well. Because if we're going to consider both of them staff members that fall within the range and or our salary procedure, then they should be considered staff members instead of contractual staff. And so, you know, I don't want to compare Hess to Parker because they both are very, very different. I'm sure that they both have very unique styles, different abilities, and what have you. But the last thing that I want to say is, if my memory serves me correct, when we hired Steve Polasek, we hired him at around $134,000, $35,000 is what I remember the offer that was made to him at one of the meetings. But when the salary came up for vote, it was no longer $135,000. It was $154,000. And I remember because I voted for Steve as an individual to be hired, but I voted against the salary package that he was presented with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, okay, next we have Councilman Hildebrand. Thank you, Councilor Opresa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow councilors. I did also read this thoroughly, and I've also read Mr. Nebb's contract thoroughly. And as it's been said, this mirrors Mr. Nebb's contract, which are our professional leadership that we have. My question to you, Councilor Foster, when you said who's going to authorize his expenses, who authorizes Mr. Nebb's expenses? Is it self-authorization? Because he just came back from a conference up in Albuquerque. Who's going to authorize his meals? Who's going to authorize his travel? Is the council, should the council be doing that? Because you're saying the council should do that with the city attorney, so should we not be doing that with the city manager?
The city manager has the ability to spend up to $60,000. And of course, if he was traveling, like my example was the superintendent wanted to go to Italy for a conference. If our city manager was doing something like that, we do have the ability to pull him back or actually vote him out of office.
But
my question.
Let me just ask you, because I want to stay on that point, then I think that's a bad management decision allowing somebody to self-authorize the use of city funds.
Well,
that's a bad management decision.
That's fine.
That should be changed.
But that's also the contract we already have signed with him. We're trying to, and he is the CEO of this city. So even that, this is a contract we're discussing. So if you think it's bad, then you would agree then that it's bad for our attorney to be able to self-authorize?
Yeah.
So I want to know who is going to authorize the expenses. That's my question.
Well,
You know,
This contract was just mirrored after, and our city manager was the one who set up here at last city council meeting and said that he would take care of this and get the salary squared away. And so I got to believe that we have hired the city manager to take care of these issues, and when he made that statement, I said, okay, he's the CEO. He's in charge, and this is what he came back with. And so therefore, I support this, but I do think that we need to revisit self-authorization of the use of city funds. I think it's a violation, and that's an error that should be corrected, no matter who the city manager is. I take names out of these positions, and I look at the process and the procedures, and that's a bad. That allows, I'm not saying anybody does, but when you have self-authorization up to $60,000, I can just reach in the cooking jar and take whatever I want as long as it's under $60,000. Because I can self-authorize.
Well, and
So-
that's not how it's done, but you're,
but
you're
you
trying
just said
to.
that
Well,
he
he
can
does.
self-authorize
He does
for
have the
$60,000.
ability, as a city manager, to make those expenditures.
Right.
But then my question is, who came, the 135,000, did Joe Nebb come up with that 135,000?
I'm hearing.
Well, he's not here.
I'm hearing this
But
from
there's
Mr.
two
Matthews.
other people, there's two other people that were in the conversation, and they're both sitting here. Mr. Matthews wasn't.
Well, I'm going to have to rely upon Mr. Matthews getting his information from his superior. So, Mr. Matthews, would you mind telling us what your superior said?
Once again, councilors, Mr. Knapp stated very confidently that he was very comfortable with the grade that this was placed on and the salary, that he was comfortable with it. And I do know that he mirrored his contract. You stated that because he had pulled it off, was looking for it one day when I was in his office, so I know he was using his contract to build this one. He told the council at the last meeting, I will work with the mayor to establish a contract for this position. My understanding, that's exactly what he did. Now, y'all can debate different aspects of it, but that's what the city manager done.
Well, and my question still holds to the mayor or to Mr. Itema. Where'd the 135,000 come from? Did Joe Nebb say 135, or did one of you two come in and say 135? That's my question.
Well, I will yield my time now because I don't think your question is appropriate under my time. But I now yield back to you if you wish to do that, please, following procedure. Not trying to be rude, but I will yield my time to you now if you care to ask your question.
All right. Well, I asked my question.
The salary schedule was something that I looked at, and I talked with Mr. Nebb about it, about his experience, his work with the municipal league and some of the other areas that we had. We didn't look at a salary schedule necessarily based only in Roswell. We looked at salary schedule where we talked about salaries that are being paid in other cities and around New Mexico and other things. So that's where we came up with the 135,000. And according to looking at some of the things that were out there, we thought that was the negotiated rate we looked at, talked about, and came up with. And that's where that salary came from.
So I gave a proposed salary. Mr. Nebb countered. In particular, he wanted it to be on the salary schedule. I accepted his counter.
I ask what your first proposal was?
Sure. 137. And my salary proposal came from the GS scale federally. So we have, which is where I was practicing previously, an attorney with my years of experience is typically going to fall on the GS 15 side of the scale. That's going to be anywhere, the lowest level GS 1 is 131. The highest level GS 15 is going to be in the 180s.
I'll yield.
Thank you. Council Lady Moore, you were on here and then it went away. Yeah, Council Lady Moore was on here and I didn't know if it just went off and I didn't know why, so.
You know you took it off, I know.
I didn't. I didn't.
It's okay. I just had a question on the severance. Is that a standard severance for all lawyers? Because I didn't know if
No, this
severance, I just didn't understand. Is that severance normal? I don't know who to ask.
So yeah, it really depends on the contract. The reason the severance made it in was that it was based on Mr. Nebb's contract. It's like I said before. I serve at the will of the council. The severance simply allows me time to move into a next position if that becomes necessary in the next.
And
That concerns me a little bit, only because of the way it went in there. But the other part of it, I'm okay with. The price itself, I'm okay with. But the seventh part of it, I can't. And I understand Mr. Nebb's way of doing it, but I feel like you and him aren't in the same boat. So him using his contract is different, but a little bit different because they're not in the same position. But I only have a concern about the severance. The rest of it, I don't have. The numbers and the rest of it, I don't have a problem. I'm just kind of concerned about the severance, especially because of the way this is going about. I'm just kind of
Sorry to interrupt, Counselor. I'm happy to cut that part, and I mean, the procedure here, since we're openly negotiating, I'd have no opposition to the council amending this to cut the severance out right now. That would not be an issue.
Thank you.
I don't think severance is appropriate for public employees as a general rule, so I ought to live by that.
Thank you. You.
Council Lady Best.
Okay, so I'm trying to go back to August and understand when we started this appointment deal. So when we started it, from what I understood from you, Tim, is that the mayor appointed the attorney. The attorney works for the mayor, the council, and then the city. Is that what I'm to understand?
I don't know that they are not all one and the same.
Well,
but the mayor has Mr. Nebb or Mr. Eintema, would you care to explain how it works when you have more than one master?
Happily. Strangely is the short answer, Mr. Mayor. But no, the rule of ethics require that my ultimate client be the municipal corporation, and that is expressed through the 11 of you.
okay, so that's the council that you work for. You work for the council because our orders, if you want to call them that, go to you. Part of our orders are you take care of the city business. Is that correct?
Indirectly, yes.
Okay. So my next question is, when we started this contract deal, since the council is the keeper of the keys, and we each have a vote for our citizens, to me, this should go, whether it's a different situation of Joe's contract to you, vice versa, it should go to legal. Then it needs to be voted on in legal to come to council, and it needs to be worked over in legal, because he is saying that he will be glad to get rid of that one situation right here, the severance, is that what we're calling it? That you would be glad to get rid of the severance. I think there's more things in here that need to be approached. Kind of have a problem with the price, but hey, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't pay for school, so forth and so on. So I think, in my mind, it needs to go back to legal. Right now, you're employed by the city manager. Am I correct? You're employed. Who are you employed by?
I believe the city manager.
You're not appointed, right? Well, you're
no,
kind of
I'm appointed, but I believe it was the city manager's authority that activated a payment that I currently, I haven't received any payment currently.
You're employed like any other department head in the city.
That's my understanding.
Okay. So we agreed to bring you on, which I have a problem that we didn't have a choice, because usually we have a choice and it goes through a committee, because you've already been through that committee once and were dismissed once back in 2020, but you're back here again, which is fine. I mean, I personally think it needs to go back to legal. I'd like to make that motion, if everybody else is pretty much done with this, that it goes back to legal and we reapproach this in legal and then bring it back to council next month. So that's my motion at this point.
We have a motion by Counselor Foster to, or Counselor Best to move this to, back to legal, and a second by Counselor Foster. Is there any discussion? Counselor Orpresa.
Mr. Mayor, you know, I don't agree that we should send this back to legal. Because you're asking, and again, I have a hard time saying your last name, so I'm gonna say the first name, Has, to wait another month to determine what his salary is going to be. And our rules of order do not require an issue to go through a standing committee anyway. An issue can be brought to full council at any time by the 5 councilors, by the mayor, by the city manager, the way it reads right now. And even if it goes back to legal, I'm not sure what we expect legal to look at. Because we're going to be doing the same thing next month here, regardless of what legal committee does. And even if legal committee denies the contract for whatever reason, we're still going to end up here having the same discussion again. And so I don't think that it's a wise thing to do to take it back to legal. And again, this is only prolonging his to be paid if we wait another additional month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Councilman Perry.
I would just say, I do think that from listening to Councilor Orpesa, I do think that this is before us now. The council made a decision to approve the appointment of Mr. Intema to the council. I hope I said that right.
Close enough, sir.
Okay. But the council made that approval. I'm concerned of just kicking the can down the road. Anything that needs to be changed at this time, we've actually got a pretty light agenda tonight. I'm hoping there's not much more controversial things on the agenda. There may be, but I'm not aware of any. I'm willing to put the time into it if there needs to be any kind of motions. It sounds like from Mr. Intema that he is comfortable with Article 7 coming out of the contract. So ultimately it'll be this governing body making that decision. So I think we just go ahead and put the work into it, and let's get this behind us. Let's get this department rolling. Let's get to where we need to be to start functioning the way we can to the best of our ability. Is my thoughts. I yield.
Any further discussion on this issue? No.
The queue, I thought. It's flashing. Am I not?
Are you one on this issue right now? You have a motion on the floor and you've already spoke. So, and you want to speak?
You spoke. No, I spoke on the contract, and this is on the tabling motion.
Okay, on the tabling, but it's not a tabling motion.
I'm moving it to legal. Correct. The other question I have is, what is the term of that the questions that haven't been answered, and that's why I think it needs to go to legal. I'm reading this job description, and it says, serves a definite term of up to 2-year period as allowed by New Mexico state statute. So that means that there's already a term. It's only up to 2 years. And so those are my questions. It's in the job description, yet then why are we having a contract?
I can answer to that, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Foster.
Mr. Heitema.
The term is a function of state law, so every time there's a new council seated, the appointed officers are either reappointed, nothing happens, in which case their contracts roll over, or somebody else is appointed in their place, with the exception of the manager. So this is just stating what state law requires.
So it's still, there's so many questions that I would rather not try to tear it apart tonight, but if we need to, so be it. Well, let's see. Let's go ahead and vote.
Okay. All right, on this issue, everybody's spoken. The reason that Mr. Nebb's contract was used is because of this is not the only person in that position. When you look at it, and under the laws of the state of New Mexico, there are 4 people that are listed, or 3, and now the attorney is listed in there in court cases. Those 4 people are the appointments of the mayor, and in that, Mr. Nebb has, in his contract, he has a position in there about when his termination is, and that session was put in there. Ms. Davies, I think, has had people talk to her that she lost all her rights or whatever when she was appointed the treasurer. I've had people tell me that she was told that. I don't believe that's the case. But so this would give everybody that was appointed under this action the same type of rights or privileges, as I see it, of the appointments of all the people in the class that the mayor that is elected in a mayor-council form of government is entitled to appoint. Now the law was here before I got elected, and that's it. If the city of Roswell did not follow it, that is the city of Roswell's mistake. But the law is the law, and it was set up the way it is, I think Mr. Neeb, rightly so in my opinion, said that because that's the way it was with his contract, that would be a fair contract for whoever else came later. And so really, when you look at that, is it fair to have any kind, if you're going to say that he is not entitled to that position, even though he said it's okay to take it out, then do we also have to take it out of Mr. Nebb's contract? Because I'm going to say that why should anyone, if he is not entitled to that, why is Mr. Nebb entitled to it? I'm just saying that when you look at it, all 4 of those positions should be treated exactly the same. All 4 positions are covered under the laws of this state in the same manner. They're in the same statutes. So they should be treated exactly the same.
So I have a quick question right there. So that means that the police
Counselor, you
is
can
going to get a
talk
contract?
when you're through. When I'm through, you can talk. But don't interrupt me, and I'll do my best not to interrupt you. And so, to me, when we look at all this stuff, it's very clear in the statutes about who can be appointed in this situation. And if you have one and you give one of those appointments something, I think under that you probably have to give one of the others, or the other 3, the same level of care. You don't, when you hire a teacher or anything else, if anybody comes along and they're all in the same class, they get the same rights. And when they're not, then when they're not the same, when they're in a different class, they can get different rights. But we're in the same class, and we give Mr. Neeb goes through as far as on his retirement or whatever else, it all goes through there and pays. Nobody's going to go kick Miss Davies off of her retirement income or anything else, I don't think, because she's now the treasurer where she was working before. So I think just if we keep everybody in the same class, then things are fair and equal according to the laws that have been passed and give us guidance in how we operate in a mayor-council form of government, mayor-council, city manager form of government. And that's where, yeah. Now, Council Lady Best.
So from what I'm understanding now, your police that you're going to appoint, you haven't got there yet, your treasurer that you have appointed, the city clerk that you haven't appointed yet, we have an interim, the attorney, and there's one more, so there's 5.
Four.
Police officer.
Police officer.
She already said that.
Police officer.
There's 4? Okay. I thought there was 5. Anyway, so all of those people now are going to have contracts. So now Ms. Davies is not going to be employed by the city. She's going to be appointed, and she has to have a contract. Because I don't think she has a contract right now.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Opresa.
Mr. Mayor, I think we're crossing the line and discussing personnel in public.
Then we need to take it back to legal so we can talk about it in a closed session, or have a closed session tonight. No, we can't do that, can we? We can't add a closed session. So have a closed session next month. He will get his pay. That's what you were worried about.
Just a point of order.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Perry, you're next on the list.
No, I did have a question, but just on a point of order, we can call closed session at any time if it deals with the processes that the state allows for. And that's true. Human resources would be one of those situations where we could, if we feel it is necessary. My question just, I'm ready to vote and move forward, but I have some confusion. Because, Mr. Mayor, if it's said or thought that, because I understood when we moved or shifted from the attorney from the way we did things then to how we did before, that it was brought up the case that was against either Ruidoso Downs or Ruidoso. I can't remember which one it was a clerk. Do you remember?
Yeah, Ruidoso Downs and the village clerk.
Right, and so she was not entitled to the same abilities as the general employee of the city was, is my understanding correct?
Yes, so the Ruidoso Down case stands for the proposition that the merit system cannot be applied to that class of employee. So any part of the merit system protection generally I would like to have, I need to negotiate, which is partly why the severance is in there. Like I said, we don't need to, I mean, I will concede that, that's no big deal. But like other things like para, for example, being in the contract is because that's typically done through the merit system. And so, yeah, that's why the contract has a bunch of clauses, just reiterating what I've negotiated employee treatment through the contract because the merit system cannot apply to me.
So just by that, Mr. Mayor, my concern is that I'm not sure that the council or Ms. Janey's, I can't speak for her, she's not here this evening, had that total understanding because she's still the finance director of the city, which gives her merit ability. So if the appointment takes away that merit ability, then I would think that position that she'd probably love to not have to worry about every day of being the finance director comes into play. So I think there's the old saying, if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the pew. I think there's some confusion with that. If there's going to be an equality in the way that we handle things, I think that we just need to make sure we all understand that.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor, and I just want to really briefly address the question because I believe if there's some clarification that needs to be provided, for example, with regards to the finance director and the treasurer, I can tell you that prior to the reappointment of the treasurer, I was appointed as well as the treasurer. In my position, it was just a ceremonial. I was the director of administrative services, and that was just a ceremonial appointment of that title. Basically, that's all it was. Essentially, that's what we were continuing if the understanding, if that's what was provided. I believe if there's a little bit of a difference of opinion of what it meant when that appointment was made, I think it's only fair, and I would caution, I think it's only fair to Ms. Davis to make sure that it is clear, because she is the finance director, and it was only a ceremonial appointment of that title. But if there's other meanings to that, I think we need to have a bigger discussion with the city manager and our personnel and HR.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Counselor.
We have a motion on the floor and a second, and we have wandered away. Could we get back on track and call for a vote on this motion? Because we're talking about items that don't even reflect on this motion. So I'm asking for a vote.
You making a motion to call the question? Or just, is there any further discussion? Seeing none.
Call the question.
The clerk will call the roll. A motion to return this back to legal. You want to vote on, well, nobody, I asked if anybody else wanted to say anything, nobody said anything, so that's why it went on. All those, on a motion of the previous question, the clerk will call the roll. Is that right?
You need
Right now, we're just on the question.
This is the question, the vote on, you're moving to call the question, right?
Call for the question.
He calls for the question. Is there a second? Okay, we have a second by Councilman Moore. We have a motion to call the question by Councilman Hildebrand and a second by Council Lady Moore. The clerk will call the roll.
Okay, Counselor Moore? Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa?
Yes.
Counselor Hildenbrand?
Yes.
Counselor Foster?
Yes.
Counselor Korn?
Yes.
Counselor Arnold?
Yes.
Counselor Best?
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez? Counselor Halverson?
Yes.
Mayor, motion passes 10-0.
Most close. Okay, we're back on that motion to send this bill, this subject matter to the legal committee. The clerk will call the roll.
Counselor Moore? No. Counselor Perry? No. Counselor Hildenbrand?
No.
Counselor Foster?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa?
No.
Counselor Foster?
No,
I did.
we've already called Counselor Foster.
Counselor Korn? Apologize.
No.
Counselor Arnold?
No.
Counselor Best? Yes. Counselor Sanchez? No. And then Counselor Halverson?
By a vote of 8 in the negative and 2 in the affirmative, the motion to send back to legal has been defeated. We're back on the item for the city attorney. Now I have Councilman Foster and Councilor Moore on the agenda. Councilor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that we remove section 7.1, A, B, and C, and section 7.3. From the contract.
Could you repeat that again, Councilor Foster?
I make a motion to remove 7.1, A, B, and C, and 7.3.
Okay, we have a motion, and it's moved and seconded to remove item 7.1 through item 7.3, which is on page 146 and 147. Pardon? Oh, you?
Yes,
Oh,
Mr. Mayor,
excuse me.
7.2 stays,
Okay.
and I've got no problem with that.
So you're going to remove item 7.1 in its entirety, and 7.3 are the two items being removed. Any questions on that by anyone? Yes. Oh, excuse me. Council Lady Moore, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Can you use your mic, please?
What's the reason for 7.2? If we were taking the whole severance package part out, why would you leave 7.2?
It explains that it says resignation, expiration, or breach of contract. Should this contract be terminated as set forth in section 6.1B, 6.1C, or 6.1D, the attorney will not be entitled to any severance compensation or benefits as set forth in this contract.
Okay. Are you?
So that part stays in. Okay. Any further comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, even though I appreciate you're saying you want this removed, but this is a carbon copy of the city managers. Now, section 7.1C says, in the event the attorney is terminated by the governing body during the 6 months immediately following seating and swearing in of one or more new governing body members, and during that time the attorney is willing and able to perform his duties under this agreement, then attorney is entitled to 1/4 the salary. I don't think that should be struck, because you're not operating at a political whim. And if it becomes a political event, which it shouldn't be, but you should be entitled, as the city manager is entitled, to 1/4 your salary. And I think that's why it was put in there in the beginning, and why the city manager has that in there, because a new sitting council can come in and go, you're done, and you're down the road. That's not fair to any employee at all. So I would like to see that item 7.1C left in this contract. And so therefore, I'm going to make a motion to amend the contract that item 7.1C be continued in this contract. Because I think it's only fair for any employee that has to answer to an elected governing body doesn't get caught up in politics. Even though we're nonpartisan, but they need some type of financial protection for their family as to not just being moved on down the road. So I disagree with what you said you wanted to do just based on these facts. So I make a motion that we amend and leave 7.1C in this contract.
Second.
We have a motion now to allow item 7.1C to stay in, would the makers of the original motion consider that a friendly amendment? No, you would not. Okay. Okay. So when we get into the business of amending amendments, it gets to be a little bit complicated. But yes, Council Lady Moore.
Can you use your mic, please?
Oh, it's on. I'm on the mic. So if the new mayor, so you're saying like a new mayor comes in because he appoints, so one person a new person couldn't come in and put him out because the mayor appoints them. So a new council person couldn't come in and put him out, right?
No, if you want me to answer. A new governing body could. A new governing body could.
But only if.
But you have to
because
have.
we still have to vote six.
You have the vote. So a governing
I got
body, say a whole new governing, or 5 new governing bodies come in,
I get you. I get you.
and they can do that. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
So, yes. Councilman, Councilman Foster.
On that statement on C, it says one or more new governing body members. So correctly, if one of us resigns and another one's appointed in its place, yes, that sets up this so that there's a 6-month period. So one person changes, and it sets that up. That is exactly what it's written.
So, okay, so we're at that point now. We're back, and the amendment that we have now that was moved by Councilman Hildebrand and seconded by Councilor Arnold is to replace item 7.1C back into the contract. Is that, everybody agrees with that? Okay, then the clerk will call the roll.
Counselor Moore? Counselor? Counselor Perry? I'm sorry, let me back up. Counselor Moore, you said no? Okay, just the wrong button. Okay, Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa?
Yes.
Counselor Heldenbrand?
Yes.
Counselor Foster?
No.
Counselor Corn?
Yes.
Counselor Arnold?
Yes.
Counselor Best?
No.
Counselor Sanchez? Yes. Counselor Halverson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-3.
Okay, so now we're back on the amendment we would, as the amendment as amended, we would be voting on removing item 7.1, sections A and B of 7.1. 7.1C would stay in the contract, and we would remove item 7.3. So, does everybody understand that? So we would, there's no question,
I'd like
okay?
to have clarification from council.
Council, is
Is
that,
that correct?
so?
That's correct.
Okay, yes. So, right, so we're now to vote. Councilors, item. He's ready, you ready to, well, I want to make sure he understands it, so, okay? Okay, the clerk will call the roll.
Counselor Moore? Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa,
No.
Counselor Hildenbrand,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Corn,
No.
Counselor Arnold,
No.
Counselor Best,
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez, that was a yes, correct?
Yes.
Counselor Halverson,
No.
motion passes 6-4.
Okay, we're back on item 19 as it is. Any further discussions? Clerk will call the roll on a motion of due pass for item, agenda item 19. I think that's right.
Counselor Moore,
To approve the contract.
correct. With the amendments. Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa,
Yes.
Counselor Hildenbrand,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Corn,
Yes.
Counselor Arnold,
Yes.
Counselor Best,
Nope.
Counselor Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Halverson,
Yes.
six. Motion passes 8-1.
8, no, there was, it can't, has to be 8.
No, she abstained.
Oh, we had one abstention, but you had Councilman Corn?
Counselor Moore
You were
abstained.
yes? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, by a vote of 8-1, one abstention, item 19 is passed. Next, we have to ratify. We need to take a break? Okay, we'll take a break for, what, 15 minutes? Is that? 10? 5 minutes, okay, a 5-minute break. It'll probably last 10.
Yeah, no, no.
I wanted to save you.
Yeah, no, I
Blake.
appreciate it.
Oh, that's you.
That's what I said.
You'll have to get over it. Counselors, if you could come back in. One of the things we have to do tonight, if we can, the Commission on Aging there is a counselor that needs to be assigned to the Commission on Aging. So do I have any volunteers? Be thinking about volunteering for the Commission on Aging. Councilman Perry and Moore and Opresa and Hildebrand.
Are you putting me in that category?
It doesn't matter where you are. We would like to have someone young. When you get to be older, you like to see young people a lot more, so you can learn about our problems we have when you get to be older. And so I think I have a conflict, so I can't appoint myself, but I would have to appoint to one of you all, and I was hoping to have a volunteer. But while we're all back here now, and if we can go ahead and start item 20 on today's calendar, to ratify change order number 1 for the Mountain View Waterline project. So we have Councilman Perry, if you'd care to make a motion. Keep your pen on your side.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that we approve. Let me grab my pages correctly. 151.
Project ITB-22-002 Mountain View Waterline project.
Make a motion that we approve the change, that we ratify the change order 1 for the final project ITB 22-002 for the Mountain View Waterline project in the amount of $70,108.41, which includes the GRT of 7.7083.
I think we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Corn. Okay, next. Louis, would you please?
Yes, sir. Mayor, Council, good evening. What you have before you is the ratification of the final change order for Mountain View. The project is complete. The change orders to reconcile all the bid items to final quantity. We had some leftover parts, which one of them was a 24-inch butterfly valve that is $40,000. But all we want to do is ratify this so I can get the money back from RISD, except for the $40,000 that becomes the extra parts that will become part of warehouse inventory for water maintenance and transmission. The picture you see before you is where the water line went. It was on the north side of the road, adjacent to the road, and that's one of the construction pictures, and I stand for any questions.
Well, that's a pretty straight line. It's a little off, but you checked it. Okay, any comments or questions about the Mountain View project? Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nahart, let me ask you about the $40,000 that we're not going to get reimbursed on. Is this an item?
This will be part of water maintenance and transmission's warehouse parts inventory.
Right, but does this have to be a budget adjustment, or is this going to be inside their current year budget?
I believe they're paying for it within their current year budget. But
Excuse me, was it the school was paying for the valve, or we were paying for the valve?
no, we had extra parts. The school's only going to pay for the parts that were incorporated into the project, which are the final bid items. The leftover parts we're paying, as you look on my copy of the change order on page 153, your packet, I call that non-participating. So that'll be non-participating, non-reimbursable from the school. We're only going to charge the school for the stuff that actually pertains to the completed project.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, this will not require a budget adjustment. This will just transfer into warehouse inventory, and once somebody charges it out, like we actually purchase it, then it'll hit the budget itself.
Okay, so there's no additional charge to the budget at all?
Not for the
You'll find a way inside your current budget to make this work?
Yes, sir, Councilor Hildebrand. That's only on the $40,000. The rest of it will require us to pull it out of our operating budget.
Right, but that's going to get reimbursed, so
Yes,
we're okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Yes, Councilman Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say, first of all, that my mic went off there. The fact that working with the schools and getting this set up and having them a customer, but my next question is, have they hooked up yet to it?
Negative. We called them when it was ready to hook up, and basically we were told, thank you, we'll hook up when we're ready.
Okay, but I do like the fact that we worked with them and we got this done, so.
Yeah,
when
they did make the first reimbursement a couple of months ago, so, no, working good with them. For those of you that weren't around, we did the same thing for Berendo Elementary School. Yeah, they want to do the remodel before they hook up.
Okay. With Berendo, we hooked up to sewer too, right?
Negative. What happened with Berendo, we did the water line, they reimbursed us. What they have, they're tied into our sewer over there at the corner of Berendo and Pine Lodge and North Main, but they have a force main. So the school has their own lift station, and then they pump it through a 2-inch, they grind it, and they pump it into a 2-inch, and it goes to the manhole at the intersection of Pine Lodge and Main. But that was paid for separately by our ISD.
Okay, because prior to that, they were on septic, so.
That is correct. They are tied into our sewer, but they have their own private lift station.
Thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, do you want to call the roll call? All those in favor of item 20 on the calendar signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Item 20, ITB, project ITB 22-002 Mountain View Watering Project has been approved. Next, we have,
Excuse me, Mayor. Can we get Councilor Sanchez to vote on his box?
no, I guess not.
Okay.
Okay, next we have, for item 23, I'm sorry, 21, I wrote over it. Item 21, to approve the water line construction funded by the legislative grant for the baseball fields at Cielo Grande Sports Complex, which is $323,000. And Councilman Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make with the recommendation of the Infrastructure Committee and a vote of 3-0, I make a motion that we approve the water line construction at Cielo Grande in the amount of, which has $323,205 in unobligated funding from the legislative grant.
We have a motion by Councilman Perry. Is there a second? Councilman Corn seconds. Is there any further discussion? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Nahar. Go ahead.
Mayor, briefly, we have $323,000 roughly of unallocated money. There's an excerpt from the master plan. No matter what's going to get built out there, we need water. You need to start from the underground up with any development. What we're proposing, if you look at this drawing here, we have a water line on Nevada, which is the west side of Cielo Grande. We have a water line on Montana. We want to build about 3,000 feet of water line connecting to both of them, looping it to provide better service to Cielo Grande, also to the customers on Nevada and Montana. It's about 3,000 feet. Depending on the prices when we bid it, we should be able to spend the unallocated money and complete the loop. And that's the proposal that we have before you.
Any further questions? No. Councilman Perry,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say, this is appropriations from the legislature, and our legislators gave this money to go towards a project of looking at what the potential possibilities are with this leftover. This falls in line with this, and it allows for whatever we do out there to have that loop that is critical, that we're really missing out in that area for that water. It also leaves potential area for, regardless of what we do in the future, for restroom facilities, for watering. There's just a lot of things, and anytime you've got the ability to put in water, and we're very appreciative as well of the legislators for thinking of Roswell as we're moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Perry. Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nahart, how do you know what the cost of this project is going to be?
I'm guessing and hoping it's going to be $100 or less a foot.
Is that what we're paying now, or what your experience tells you that?
Well, if you look at the item we just had before you, that we bid about a year ago, 10-inch water line from Mountain View was $45 a foot. Without the fire hydrants, valves, and everything else, the price has gone up, so it's an engineering guess that we're going to have about $100 a foot when you have the prices of the pipe, the valves required, and some fire hydrants. And if we're lucky and we bid and we have leftover money, then it's going to be my job to come up with how to spend another money, and I'll be here proposing something else.
Mr. Fuentes, when does this money have to be spent or obligated?
2024.
24? So we would have time then for you to go get a bid on this so that we know exactly what this is going to cost, would we not?
That is correct. The proposal I have in front of you is that we still have design money. I have a PO ready for designers. We'll get the plans, we'll bid it. This will be for the construction money only. If we come in under, everything's good, and depending how much money we have left over, we can do a change order, or if there's a significant amount of money, then we come up with another bid. But by taking care of this now, and as Mr. Fuentes said, it's 2024, we have time to bid it and come back if I have change left over.
So you're asking us to approve this $323,000?
What I'm asking for you is to give me permission to proceed with getting them plans, put it out to bid, and of course, when we do come out to bid, you'll have to approve the award of the bid when it happens.
Okay, so we're going to put out some design money right away.
No, I already have design money. We have the first PO is for design. I haven't spent it all because when we did the master plan, everything went on hold. We did the first phase of the master plan. There's still money left to develop plans and everything else. So, okay, let's spend money that we can use for anything. So let's come up with a set of, it's going to take about 3 sheets for the water line, and then we bid it out and see where we're at.
Yeah, so at that point in time, we either can accept it or, let's say it takes more money.
If it takes more money, what you can do in a bid process, we can ask the low bid if he'll be able to trim it, or we can reject all the bids, trim it, and rebid it.
Okay, I'm just, because I know how tight the budget is.
Correct.
You understand how tight the budget is, that if this comes in at a higher rate, then what are we going to do?
No, the idea is to only spend the $323,000. So I'm guessing $100 a foot at 3,000 feet. That's $300,000 and $23,000 roughly for tax.
Councilor Perry, I mean, I'm trying to understand this whole thing and why you guys at your committee and why we don't see a bid in front of us so that we know exactly what we're spending. That's just a question.
Councilor Hildebrand, I don't want to go to the expense of paying, using design money and putting out a bid if council's not going to be happy with the topic that we have before you. So I want to make sure there's buy-in that, okay, we're going to do the water line. All right, let me step forward, get the plans designed, bid it out, and I'll come back with you with the award. And I agree with you completely. If we're over the $323,000 budget, I will recommend rejecting the bids. I go back and I cut it back 200 feet, 300 feet, whatever it takes to get it back to within budget. Because this is legislative money. We want to take advantage of that. We don't want to use any of the water maintenance transmission money.
Yeah, I don't disagree that we don't want to take advantage of that. I just want a question for Councilor Perry to help me through that.
And I think Councilor Corn was my second. I would be more than willing to clarify the motion to where it's maybe codified just a little differently if Councilor Corn would at least entertain hearing that consideration.
Let me hear what you want to say, and then I'll decide.
I understand. I would like to change that motion to say that the motion would be to approve the bid process for a waterline construction to be funded by the legislative grant for the Cielo Grande Sports Complex at the amount of $323,205 in non-obligated funds, or not to exceed $323,205 in unobligated funding.
I'll continue.
Okay, so we have Councilman Perry. Is that you done? Okay, Councilman Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. The other thing that this does that we haven't brought up yet is it increases our water capacity to have another loop in that area, correct?
That is correct. It'll enhance the capacity, the quality, and if you look at the Montana, remember we just had a break on Montana closer to the new NOP. Eventually, we're going to have to replace the 36-inch water line from 19th to 8th Street on Montana, which was on our list of a master plan 2012. So when you do that, you have to turn off the 36-inch water line. By adding this extra segment of a loop, it helps us cut it off in pieces and still maintain water to our customers, which is not only our park service, but also the residences to the east and to the south.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now, any further questions? On this water line, when it goes through like that, do you have to put a fire plug every 700 feet?
Negative. We'll put the fire plugs based on elevation and what would it make it better for water maintenance and transmission to flush and maintain their system. Again, when we do the design, it's the consultant, it's myself, and it's Lorenzo Sanchez, because they're the ones, whatever I build, they're going to have to maintain and operate.
You'll place them in the lowest point? Your fire
Plus, on the edges. And on a project, simply you could put one on each end and in the middle. Simply talking, but we're going to have to be more strategic with that, and then we want to minimize the valves, because valves cost so much money, but we also want to make sure that there's enough valves so they have control if there's a break or any other maintenance operation that we'll be doing in the future.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, on a motion by Councilman Perry, second by Councilman Corn, all those in favor of approving the waterline construction funded by the legislative grant at Cielo Grande Fields signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks. Everybody voted. So by a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, item 21 is duly passed. Now, let's see. On item 22, let's see, Councilman Perry, this is the replat of the industrial park subdivision of the city of Roswell for the expansion of the drainage detention pond. Councilman Perry.
Mr. Mr. Mayor, with the recommendation of the Infrastructure Committee and the vote of 3-0 to move forward, I make a motion that we approve the replat of the industrial park, move forward with a replat of the industrial park subdivision owned by the city of Roswell for use and expansion of drainage detention pond.
We have a motion by Councilman Perry, seconded by Councilman Best. Is there any discussion?
Why is this?
This is, seeing, Louis, would you like to?
Okay, I just want to clarify that, again, I'm coming to you for buy-in with what I want to do before I proceed with going with the work. Brasher Industrial Park, well, let me show you this. This is the South Roswell study that was done in 2000. You can see that Brasher was analyzed. There is a storm system from Main Street to the west that was put in on Brasher. There was no outlet, so they covered it up. They plugged the inlets, the drop inlets. In 2000, the drainage pond was supposed to be the 23 acres where Admiral Beverage is right now. So what I want to do now is also in the ICIP, the number 2 pick was the Brasher drainage design. No matter what we do with Brasher drainage, you got to take the water somewhere. My concept is we own the industrial park. We already own the property. We haven't developed it because if you see in 2012, I gave an estimate without sewer that was roughly $600,000. There's about 33 acres total, including where I want to put the 23 acres for the pond. So that's roughly $20,000 of an acre of improvement cost in 2012. That's gone up higher now in 2022. As I understand, the market price is about $10,000 an acre. So we would never get our money back on that, and I think that's the reason why since 2012 there has been no improvement to the industrial park. As an example, our ISD just bought the property that already has water and sewer available and a street without curb and gutter, but it's paved where the new Nancy Lopez school is going to go. If the newspaper is correct, which I assume they are, it's roughly $10,000 an acre. So as I've looked at all this stuff, if we develop and put the water and sewer and pave curb and gutter into the industrial park, we'll never get our money back. Similar to what a developer would do. So we need to take the water. We can either put it in industrial park, which we already own, or we could always say the design, okay, we're just going to buy 23 acres from the people to the south of us. That doesn't make sense to me, but I want to bring it to council to share my ideas and my concepts before I proceed with it. If we get funded from ICIP, from legislature for a Brasher design, we've already showed that we're committed to that Brasher design by having a place of where to take the water. The picture before you have there is the top pictures, what I'm proposing, which is the north half. And if you think a detention pond, it'd be bordered to the north by the cemetery in the future, and a detention pond already there. To the south would be industrial park. So you're not even close to residential areas. There was discussion at the infrastructure, take the property from the cemetery. Back in '72, I lived inside the cemetery. I was one of the sextons, city of Carlsbad. If you've ever been to a funeral, I lived in that house in the very back. Okay? All those areas, we thought they had plenty. That's because they had ballparks. As you go now, they're going to start looking for property for folks. That's one fact that we cannot deny. We're all born to die. And so what I would say is keep it in the industrial park and leave South Cemetery property alone. But that's what I'm proposing, and I want buy-in from the council before I go hire a surveyor to do the replat and that kind of stuff. That's what you have before you, and I stand for any questions.
Any questions? Has everybody bought their plot? Oh, excuse me, Jason. Councilman Perry.
Has everybody bought their plot? I think that some are pitching in to buy me one. I don't know. I just wanted to say, you can see how everything is laid out, and there at one time the street was looping around and all that would be in front. When Federal Express came in, they really needed more than one lot to be able to make what they needed. They really wanted to be on that corner, those lots to the left, and a little bit more room. But it would be required that they would be placing in to our requirements, they would have had to put in the curb and gutter and the street going north there. And they did not want to add that to their expenses because they did not need to utilize that road. So when council approved that, that now cuts the alley out from that area. And really, it was a good thing to do because we realized that these extra areas in the back were not as feasible as what had been considered before. Also, Mr. Espiritu was there as well, and we discussed it, and he felt like there was plenty of property. I don't want to speak for you, but am I correct that there's plenty of other opportunities around the city for industrial area, that this is not going to affect our ability to draw customers in to come into our area? So this was a thought that was brought up, I don't know how many years ago, for the industrial park, way before I came in, but I think that for the size lots people are looking for now, it's just not feasible to leave it as it was. So this makes a very good option, and to be able to hopefully take some pressure off of some of this other area if we get a 300-year flood, or they're going to become 2-year floods, I guess. I don't know what they're going to be called, but you know what I mean. I yield.
Okay, any further comments? Seeing on Mr. Nahar, now, will you bring, when you look at this design, are you going to bring, because this is going to drain Main Street and Brasher?
This will be design Main Street and Brasher. Also, just to reemphasize what the existing ditch does right now, we do have a storm drain at Jaffa and Main, which is where that water is coming from. So we would be probably reanalyzing that when you do the Brasher study to make sure what your total capacity need will be for detention pond. But yes, you'll be looking at West Brasher storm drain. Hopefully we can unplug those drop inlets, incorporate that. We'll be calculating drainage, assuming Brasher's a 4-lane with curb and gutter. And of course, we've all seen the puddles at Brasher and South Main when it rains.
But are you going to be looking at bringing, when you open those things back up, bringing a ditch or a culvert all the way down and back into the retention pond?
That would be for the design. If it's easier to just tie on to what the Flood Commission already has, or do we run a separate system? Again, you still have the coordination, and you're very much aware of that, Mayor. The DOT is still a very integral part of that, and it may come to the point that we're going to have to sit down with the Chavez County and say, okay, Chavez County DOT, here's the alternatives. What does everybody bring to the table? I think the city of Roswell is already going to have a good buy-in and skin in the game if we get the legislature to help to do the design. We've got the first detention pond in my mind, but it's just a starting place. But to answer Mayor, that's going to be all part of the design. I couldn't answer that at this time. I just want to have a place already reserved that as an engineer, you can say, okay, we've got 23 acres. Let's reanalyze the 2000 study. The 2000 study said they wanted 23 acres. Okay, I've already come up with 23 acres to match that. We all know that the rain intensity appears to be getting bigger, and we would be analyzing with the latest data.
Okay. Okay, Council Lady Halverson.
Just so I'm understanding right, we're looking at using the top drawing, right? Because Admiral Beveridge owns that other one? Property?
Correct. Admiral Beverage bought that whole parcel, Council Halverson, and that's 23 acres. What we're looking at is the north half of the industrial park. We would still have a buffer behind it, whether it's a paved road or not. I still believe that we should have a buffer between the industrial park customers and the detention pond.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, all those in favor of item 22, the moving forward with replat of the industrial park subdivision for use as an expansion of the drainage detention pond, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, item 22 is passed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Next we have item 23. This is to renew the Air Service Development Consulting Services contract with Mead and Hunt in the amount of $66,625. Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We should be able to make you to let you make the motion because that's exactly the same thing I'm going to say. So that I make a move that we renew the Air Service Development Consulting Services contract to Mead and Hunt in the amount of $66,625.
Second.
Have a motion by Council Hildebrand and a second by Councilman Perry. This is to do our contract with for the consultants for Mead and Hunt, which I think we also received a grant of $400,000 from $200,000 from the state if we spend $400,000. Basically, is what it was. Councilman, Mr. Stark.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, good evening. That is correct. We did receive the grant. This item was taken to legal and was recommended 3-0 for authorization with the qualification that we did receive that grant, and it has come in and been executed. So, as the mayor said, we have got. If we spend $400,000, we get $200,000 back. So we'll get half of the cost of this service back. I want to stress that this is highly important to our air service, particularly because of the place that the airlines are in right now. As all of you know, there's a crew shortage, and they're canceling stuff every day. Just yesterday, American announced that they were canceling 3 international flights and 1 domestic flight. They're constantly looking to cut. They don't have enough crews, so they've got to cut. We don't want to be one of those. We know that most likely we're going to lose 1 flight coming up in November. We'll lose the afternoon flight to and from Dallas, but that's because of all of this, because of all of the issues with crews. So that's the defensive side. We want to have the representation with a consultant so we can maintain our connections with American and continue with the service that we have. That 3rd flight will come back. It'll only be suspended like it was last year through the colder part of the year. With that said, activities that are planned with Mead and Hunt for the fall, there is still some opportunity to stay in line for expansion of air service. We really don't have a lot of ability right now to move future United service forward because of the crew shortages. But we do have some opportunities with certain ultra-low cost airlines to go and talk to them about future Vegas service. With both of those, with United and with the other airlines that we would like to talk to this fall, if we don't have consultant services, we won't get in the door. We won't get on the telephone with them. And what that'll do is it'll take us out of the line. We'll have to go back to the back of the line and wait for our turn to get back in. So it will set us back. This contract is a renewal. It's one of 3. We've already been through them 1 year through the RFP that we did last year. So this is the first renewal. There'll be 2 more after this if the council chooses. You've already talked about the price at $66 to $625. And there's one more slide. Make sure I don't miss anything. I believe I got it all. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Councilman Perry.
I just wanted to say that it's a rough time right now with airlines, but this isn't the time to just stop because we think that it's a rough time with airlines, because I know that back when they first brought the service to Roswell, there were several within city staff, and I know John Hitchcock and several others were highly involved in that. And that's not just something that you just walk into and just immediately start in. Having these discussions, having them on board with us to be able to continue these discussions are going to be very beneficial when they do start to pick up and do start to move forward with air services. We'll already be in what I would call the queue of those potential possibilities. It's getting harder to fly right now. I just had to book a trip out of the country for November, and it was like pulling teeth just trying to get everything put in place. I know I was just talking to Councilor Corn. He had some struggles, I think, with some airlines trying to get to where he was going just earlier this month. But having this with us is going to be vital to be able to stay in that queue so that when things do start picking up, we are right in there, we're discussing. So I think it's very wise for us to continue.
Further comments? Thank you, Mr. Stark. Okay. On item 23, the clerk will call the roll on a motion of passage or to renew the Air Service Development Consulting Services contract with Mead and Hunt by Councilman Hildebrandt, seconded by Councilman Perry. Clerk, call the roll.
Mayor, that's a voice vote.
Oh, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, this item 23 is passed to council. Okay, next we have item 24, approve the contracting for Faith Group LLC for the research and generation of airport security master plan phase 2 and the systems upgrade phase 3, the amount of $98,491 for phase 2 and $64,600 and change for phase 3. Councilman Hildebrandt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that we approve the contracting of Faith Group LLC for the research and generation of an airport security master plan phase 2 and the system upgrade implementation phase 3 in the amount of $98,491.60 for phase 2 and $64,628 for phase 3.
Second.
Second was Councilman Moore. Did I get that right? Yeah. No. Arnold. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on Mr. Stark?
Yes, this is a continuation of the contract that we started with phase 1, which is the airport security program rewrite that we're doing. We only asked you to approve phase 1 when we came the first time because we knew that there would most likely be some changes in phase 2 and 3. So that's where we are now. We're at that point where we can begin phase 2. And phase 2 will be all comprehensive. It's going to include documenting airport security, staffing, training, policies, procedures, security systems, associated support infrastructure, physical security, and the rough order of magnitude cost of all of those things. What it will produce for us is a list of items that we need to spend on, a spend plan, and the idea, of course, is to make a sustainable airport security program with a plan going forward. So we're not surprised by these things. We stay ahead of them, and we're not caught by TSA going, why haven't you done this? So that is the plan, to be proactive and to plan ahead and to do this as we have hired professionals to help us with it. The phase 3 piece will be actual setting up of RFPs and bidding out of equipment that we find that we need. I believe there's one more slide. You got the fees for a total of $163,119, and the last piece is we already have ARPA grant that is separate from the city's ARP grant. $1,173,000 left on that grant. These expenses are reimbursable by that grant.
Okay, so they'll get our money back.
Yes.
Any further questions? Seeing none. If everybody would please vote for approving the contract to Faith Group for the master plans Phase 2 and 3 at the airport. The amount by a vote of 10 in the affirmative and none in the negative. We have approved this master plan. Next, item 25 is expenditure of $72,735.30 to Geneva's Cleaning Service for provide janitorial services in Building 500 at 47 Gail Harris Street. Councilman Hildebrand.
Mayor?
I'll get with you, let them get a motion on it.
No.
You want?
Before you make the motion.
Okay. Councilman Corn is requested to speak.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to be excused from voting on this item. I have a long business relationship with the proprietor, and it is continuing to today. I don't want any impropriety alleged anywhere to me or anybody on this council. So with your permission, Mayor, I'd like to be excused from the vote or any discussion on this item.
Councilman Corn, I would excuse you. Just remember you owe me one. You will be excused, and because you've expressed your conflict of interest before the vote, before we've discussed it, as I believe it's required. I think so. So now we can have Councilman Hildebrand, if you'll please make a motion to on item 25.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we authorize an expenditure of $72,735.30 for Geneva's Cleaning Service to provide janitorial services in Building 500 located at 47 Gail Harris Street, which happens to be the ILEA training facility.
We have a motion for item 25 for the expenditure to Geneva's Cleaning Service for Building 500 on 47 Gail Harris Street. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Arnold. Is there any further discussion? Oh, Councilman Stark. Excuse me, Mr. Stark.
As you remember, the ILEA lease has already been approved by you guys previously. This is part of the agreement that we would provide the janitorial services for the lease fees that we charged. Geneva's, as you know, is part of the RFP for janitorial services that we did citywide, so that's the contract that we're leaning on for procurement. She's given us a bid of $72,735 for 1 year of service for the ILEA facility. Yep, and that is it. I stand for questions.
Are there any questions, Councilman Hildebrand?
Yeah, Mr. Stark, you may want to let people know that this is also part of that.
Correct.
If you would kind of give the details of the reimbursable on the grant money as well.
Correct. I appreciate that. I did forget to say that. So the grant that I mentioned before, the ARPA grant, which had $1.1 million left on it, also specifically mentions janitorial fees, so this is also reimbursable by that grant.
Okay, so we get a freebie here on this one. So is there any further questions? Seeing none, I move that, I would ask the clerk or everybody to vote with your machines on item 26 for item 25 for the Geneva's Cleaning Service to work on Building 500 on 47 Gail Harris Street. So Councilman Corn is abstaining by a vote of 9 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Then item 25, Geneva's Cleaning Service has been approved on Building 500 on 47 Gail Harris Street. Item 26, Councilman Opresa, to approve item 26, approve the NGA Architects award for the work on the new farmland exhibit in the Entry Plaza gift shop concession area in the real space in the Bear exhibit for amount of $394,224. Councilman Opresa.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of NGA Architects LLC to be awarded for design work for the new farmland exhibit, Entry Plaza gift shop slash concession slash rental space building and Bear exhibit in the amount of $394,224.
We have a motion by Councilman Opresa. Is there a second? Second was who? Councilman Arnold?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I would recommend that we slightly amend that. It's NCA, it's a typo. But everything else is correct on that. So I just want to bring you a quick summation of what we have done in 2018. The master plan was conducted for plans for the zoo that included a farmland experience, a new entry, and whatnot. So just a brief history for you in that regards. Funding for the Leprino farmland experience in the amount of $2 million was going to help with the educational opportunity. Remaining funds were going to come from other sources available to us or that we procure in the future. As part of the plan, we wanted to create this new experience. Hopefully started in January of 2022. We presented our proposal for design and funding in the January 2022 council meeting. Next slide. Just to give you a brief timeline, in January we approved up to $460,000 for design work. In February we selected firms mainly based out of Albuquerque, all on CES program. So the design group, City of Southwest, Muslim Corbin, and NCA. March and April, several staff members of the city conducted interviews and reviewed the proposals. That included myself, Kevin Mavers, Justin Holcomb with facilities, Juan Salas with engineering. In May, I pulled everyone. We selected the best group to work with us was NCA. And we worked with the legal department to ensure that the arrangements would be in order for the contract and handled any concerns regarding our selection. And in June, terms of the design work were agreed upon and ready for council approval. Next slide. So just kind of the group that we selected is NCA's team. They've done work at the Biopark and Carlsbad zoos. Stacy works with Felis Consulting. She specializes actually in small zoos. And Robert Loftus with MRWM was part of our 2018 master plan design. So we have people very familiar with this type of project and have done this project before for other institutions in the state and around the country. So I stand before you, next slide, and request the approval for the contract that with NCA Architects LLC to award a contract for the farmland experience, Entry Plaza, gift shop concessions, rental space building, and a bear exhibit. Next slide. Thank you, and I stand for questions.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I would, just saying a statement, I just have to say, I happened to be able to be in the room when Mr. Nebb met with the folks about a contribution to our zoo to make this happen, and I just think he did a phenomenal job talking about what our city has done to be able to help with that business being here, and it was just a great thing to see that company come through to help in this matter and get this going forward. So it's a good partnership.
I concur.
Okay, any further comments? Well, just the fire truck alone that the county put in for East Grand Plains was $750,000. Just the fire truck alone because of Leprino. I mean, because they're a tall building. So that's good. It's a good partnership all the way around. Seeing none. Okay, all those in favor of approving NCA Architects to award the design work for the new farmland exhibit at Entry Plaza, signify, please vote. Signify voting aye. All those opposed, by a vote of 10 in the I'm sorry, 8 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. Item 26, NCA Architects have been approved for the design work of the new farmland exhibit. Okay. Next, we have to approve recommendations for the Commission on Aging as follows. There were two individuals, Joyce Brooks and Sandra East, who would like to stay on there. We also need a councilman. Is there a councilman that would like to volunteer to be or like to be on the Commission on Aging?
Mr. Mayor, I'd be glad to help you on that. That would be an appointment by you and would not need to be a vote by this council.
I understand that, but I was hoping to get a willing participant.
I'd be more willing if you desire to have me work there. If you have someone else in mind, I'd be more than glad to let them as well. But
Is there any other volunteers who would give me a choice? Seeing none, thank you. We will appoint you to that. Thank you for volunteering. Are there any? Excuse me. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve your recommendations to the Commission of Aging as follows. Position 2, Joyce Brooks Stevens, and Position 6, Sandra East.
Okay, and then the other appointment is mine. I don't think it needs to be ratified. So we have a motion by Councilman Perry and a second by Councilman Foster, I believe, right? All those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Or voting on your machine there. And any of those opposed, by a vote of 10 in the affirmative, none in the negative, we've solved that. Okay, boards and commission reports. Is there any boards and commissions? Public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that we have, the two people that had signed up have already spoke? Is there anyone else that would care to speak? Anyone else care to speak? Nope. Okay. So next we have future agenda items. Do we have any future agenda items on here that anybody would like to bring up? The city manager reports. Mr. Assistant City Manager, would you care to?
I don't have anything else to add other than thank you so much for the work over the last month, all the committee meetings. I think we got a lot of good things done, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So, yes.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Sanchez has handed me a paper that he has asked for me to read, starting in this order. Okay. These are some thoughts that Councilor Sanchez is wanting to be brought up to the council. Says, 1, marijuana is harmless. 2, marijuana is safe for teenagers. 3, teenagers are better off using marijuana than alcohol. 4, marijuana users are safe drivers. 5, it never killed anyone. 6, it's not addictive. 7, people who are going to use marijuana will do so no matter what anyone else says or does. 8, legalizing marijuana would not increase use, especially not teenage use. Number 9, with legalization, drug sellers would be regulated and would no longer be able to target youth. 10, marijuana laws ruin the lives of millions of innocent people and fill our prisons with people who shouldn't be there. 11, marijuana laws waste police time and money that could be spent pursuing violent criminals. 12, the best way to prevent cartel violence is by legalizing drugs. 13, does that say not on drugs? Is a police effort. Okay, this nor of drugs is a police effort to find and prosecute individual drug users. 14, the police aggressively seek out marijuana users. 15, the war on drugs has failed to rein in substance abuse. 16, prohibition of alcohol was a failure. 17, the only alternative to the war on drugs is legalization. 18, taxing legal marijuana would be a windfall for states to fund education. 19, medical marijuana laws are designed to provide compassionate care for the seriously ill. 20, most medical marijuana users are seriously. 21, medical marijuana users get recommendations from their own doctors whom they have known for years. 22, medical marijuana users must first try conventional medicines. They only get marijuana if other medications do not work. 23, there are no medications that will do what marijuana does. Then it says here, never used marijuana, used 1 to 99 times, used to 100 to 199 times, used 200 to 299 times, used 300 to 399 times, and used 400 times or more. The researchers divided them into 6 groups based on how many times they had smoked marijuana by age 21. Research shows that people without schizophrenia who smoke marijuana have particularly disorganized thinking and are more paranoid and have more chronic symptoms than that never let up and are more often irritable and hostile. In the 1930s, censorship rules were strict. Sex, violence, and illegal drugs were not permitted in Hollywood movies, but were common topics in exploitation films. This also held true for marijuana abusers, but if only they quit entirely. This study is evidence that drug abuse, including marijuana abuse, actually causes poor school performance and isn't just a statistical curiosity. Teen marijuana use and adult outcomes at age 25. Rejection, low esteem, self-condemnation, no self-worth, shame, unworthiness, guilt, grief, distrust, and betrayal, mind control, which is lies, deception, doubt, unbelief, confusion, and accusations, anger, bitterness, resentment, hate, violence, impatience, frustrations, jealousy, oppression, depression, hopelessness, discouragement, suicide, fear of failure, of dying, of rejection, of abandonment, of worry, anxiety, intimidation, insecurity, and paranoia, rebellion, pride, stubbornness, disobedience, criticism, selfishness, and self-centered idolatry, addictions, covetousness, and obsessions, sexual impurity, fornication, adultery, perversion, pornography, lust, and molestation, strife, division, divorce, jealousy, suspicion, and contention, witchcraft, Ouija boards, astrology, horoscopes, cult and occult spirits, infirmity, which is sickness, disease, all kinds of infirmity, and apathy, which brings slothfulness, procrastination, and compromise. That's from Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Counselor. Would it be possible for you to give that to the clerk so she makes sure that's a part of the record? So she doesn't have to transcribe it? Is that all right? I think she would probably like that. It would, so she doesn't have to transcribe it, if you don't mind giving that to her, so it's accurate. So is there any further comments? Seeing none, thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for your patience. Thank you all. Congratulations, I guess, Mr. Eitema. But thank you all very much. Have a good evening.